15 minutes late from our late start time. So we're off to a great start. Anybody who knows me wouldn't really expect anything less. Okay, so first is, sorry, just, the city's annual financial audit report. So we have at the table, who do we have coming up to join us?
Oh, Jennifer will be here, and then we have our auditors.
Yes, and our auditors.
And Paul and...
I don't have a printed out agenda. Oh, thank you.
Yeah, Paul and Mike.
Okay, great. So we have Paul Skeen, the audit partner from Eide Bailey. Eide Bailey. And Michael Michelson.
Yep.
Okay, also partner. Thank you for being here.
You are very welcome.
Sorry we're running late.
You know, that's, we understand, as much as accountants think the world revolves around them, we have reality checks and we know it doesn't, so no problem at all. Our plan is to give just a high-level overview of the audit process, communicate some of the communications that are required by the audit standards, and then answer any questions if they exist. One of the things that I wanted to kind of talk through is the audit process as far as a timetable. So our audit really begins in earnest. The planning and development of an audit plan begins May, June timeframe, and then our ultimate goal is to issue the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or the CAFR. We usually target the Friday before Christmas, because if that big document is issued before Christmas, everything is just a little merrier. So that's our goal, and I'm very happy to report that we did issue that on the 20th of December this year. So that in and of itself is an indication of a really good audit and good effort by management. Our field work, typically when we're on site here requesting documents, making our major push, happens the middle of September to the end of October. We usually have a team of 3 to 5 people depending on the point in that process. And one of the things that typically happens, and it did happen this year, is management is working through reconciling, closing out the books while we've already started. And at times there are adjustments that need to be made just because 2 things are happening at once. And that did happen, this year, where there were 2 adjustments that were simply a matter of management closing out the books as we started the audit. Nothing of great concern there. As auditors, our responsibility is to plan and execute an audit that provides reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. We don't look at every transaction within the city. However, we do a risk-based approach to identify what areas are susceptible to fraud or error, and we plan an audit to cover those. One of the things that we offer is an independent look, and we confirm in the letters you received as well as verbally that we are independent of Salt Lake City. We make great efforts to make sure there aren't any conflicts of interest or anything, and we do comply with independent standards set both by the Government Auditing Standards Board and the AICPA. One of the things that we do to ensure quality in our audit is at the end of the audit, we have a second partner from outside of the Utah office review our work. We feel like that adds some value where we are a regional firm. Mike and I are here in Utah, and to make sure that there's no bias or anything in our approach, we have a partner from outside of Utah within our firm take a look. We think that provides us assurance that we've done our job, but it also, I think, provides you with an opportunity to know that you're getting a fresh look each year at the process. Those are the things that I wanted to cover on the main financial statement audit. Mike heads up the compliance audit that involves federal, state dollars, and internal control, and so I'll let him cover those.
Thanks. The Office of Management and Budget has kind of established the process that we're required to follow in the single audit or the audit of the federal funds. It's a risk-based approach, prescribes that we divide the major, or the programs, federal programs that the city receives into two types, two buckets based on size. Type A being the larger and Type B being smaller. And then we assess the risk of the various programs that haven't been audited in the past couple of years become high risk. And then we have to audit at least 20% of the federal funds because the city qualifies as a low-risk auditee. If you're a high-risk auditee, then we'd have to audit 40% of the federal funds. But because you're a low-risk auditee, we only had to audit 20% of those programs in the single audit this year. And there was one program that exceeded 20% and being large, and it's not really involved, but it has some other things that make it inherently risky. We audited the airport improvement program because of the nature of the construction and what's going on out at the airport and the volume of activity and everything. We assessed that one a little bit higher, and so that was the program that we audited this year, and we issued an unmodified report on compliance for the single audit. So we didn't have any findings as a result of that. We went through that risk-based process. I just wanted you to be aware of the process in selecting our programs, and that we don't audit all of those programs. The other compliance work we did relates to state compliance issues. Our state auditor's office puts together an audit guide for auditors to follow with the things that they're concerned about. There are a lot of things in statute, and some things the state auditor feels is more serious than others, and so we used that state compliance audit guide in doing our audit of state compliance of the city, and we didn't have any findings there either, so we issued an unmodified report relating to that. So there was a separate single audit packet that was issued and has been filed with the Federal Audit Clearinghouse as required, that contains those two reports. They're not in the CAFR or the financial statements, so just wanted you to be aware that it's separate, but it has been issued and should be available to you. I think that summarizes the results of our audit. I would be happy to answer any questions on anything you're interested in or we may not have addressed.
Cindy Guest-Jensen.
Hi. The firm, just for anyone who hasn't been through this very often, the firm Eide Bailly is on contract with the City Council because the City Council is in charge of the oversight and therefore does this audit as part of the oversight. They do the audits for all of the departments. Can you say a little bit about that? You're heading that direction. I interrupted you.
I will now.
Okay, and so I'll just tell you this part that we've been working toward. Right now, the departments have the money for their audits in their department budgets. Those departments that are audited separately, which would be airport, public utilities, and then separate entities sort of would be airport, or not airport, library and RDA.
Yep.
And so right now, those entities or organizations all have the money in their budgets. In order for it to be a true oversight where you don't have the person being audited paying the auditors, we have worked with finance to implement a situation where they have Jennifer sign off on the bills before they pay them. And what we were hoping to do eventually is get that so it's a clean break so that those funds, they're still identified as airport funds, but they sit in an account that's entirely separate that the council office uses to pay for that audit. So that it's very clear that all of that, there's a collaboration with the administration, but the audit relationship is with the council. So that's what we've been working toward.
Perfect.
Great.
And with that, I think it's important to emphasize and acknowledge, Cindy brings up a great point, that while we spend, thankfully for you, we spend the vast majority of our time with management and not with you, but we do answer to council, and we're hired and retained at your discretion. So we appreciate that. We appreciate the trust you put in our firm and have certainly enjoyed that working relationship. And as such, make an open offer. Cindy has our contact information. If any of the members have questions, we've got a great working relationship with Cindy and Jennifer. They can route those to us, and we're happy to address those directly.
I'll say one other thing, and that is that a previous council had us include in the contract with whichever firm we have a contract with, but in this case, Ide Bailey, I think it started with them, that there's a possibility anytime the city council would like to engage them to do more work along these same lines that's within their scope of ability and such, you can do that. So we've contemplated that before. The council hasn't ever actually decided to engage them for extra hours, but it's an option and they're available either just for quick advice like they're describing, or if you had a project, you could work that out in terms of extra hours.
When you're doing, just a 20% audit, how do you determine which 20% you're going to audit? In this case, the
Airport.
the airport.
Uh-huh.
How do you make that determination?
So in the guidance from the OMB and the Single Audit Act, there are some specific examples and considerations as to what makes a program high risk. So we go through and we do the risk assessment of the type A's first, and we have to audit any high-risk type A's.
Type A is over a certain dollar
Yeah,
threshold
okay.
based on the total expenditures of an entity.
Thank you. In that document I alluded to, there's a page in the back that summarizes what that threshold was. So in the city's case this year, there were $26,852,000 in federal awards. So the cutoff between type A and type B programs was $805,560. So then we looked at those programs above that threshold that were type A and assessed the risk on them, and we're required to test any high-risk type A's. If there's a low-risk type A, then we go down and consider the Bs, and we assess risk on Bs until we have enough Bs identified as high risk to replace the type A that was low risk. And the city over the years has a very strong internal control system, and we've audited several programs over the years so that as we did our risk assessment, there were no high-risk type A's because we've got everything audited on a 3-year cycle so that they fall into that, and because they're automatically high risk if they haven't been audited in the prior 2 years, so that they're on a 3-year cycle. There weren't any high-risk Bs either. All the programs the city has are very mature. You had them for a long time, very few new programs. So we got to the point where we were able to exercise our judgment as to what we wanted to select to meet that 20% of coverage. And we decided that even though, based on the considerations in the OMB compliance supplement, the airport improvement program may have been low risk because we audited it last year, given the volume of what's going on there with the major construction and everything, that maybe politically or with some other inherent reasons that weren't necessarily, I don't know, specific, like I guess is the word, specific to the requirements in the compliance supplement, but more inherent from the environment and things like that, the fact that that construction is so big, we chose that one.
Okay.
Does that answer the question?
Yes.
I feel like I rambled a little
No,
bit.
that's
but-
okay. Thank you.
And probably got too technical.
That's okay. Thank you. Any other questions, council members? All right. Then thank you so much for coming, and we appreciate your great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Happy to come.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is an ordinance for zoning text amendment to increase building height limits in a portion of the Gateway or mixed-use zone. And at the table, we have Russell Weeks from council office staff, John Anderson, planning manager, and Molly Robinson, planning manager.
All right, well, thanks for having us here.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
So, Mr. Chair,
Sorry.
yeah, this for those watching on TV, this is about a petition that received a negative recommendation from the Planning Commission. The petition would increase building heights in a section of the Gateway mixed-use zone that is directly across the street from the, for want of a better word, the intermodal hub. The City Council adopted the Gateway mixed-use zone for that area in 2017. It also adopted in 2018, when it acted as the RDA board, a plan for the station center, which involved the area around the intermodal hub. I think the council has three options it can choose to do tonight. The first two ultimately would require formal action. The third one would probably suffice with a straw poll. I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Oh, let me also say that the petitioners are here tonight and want to make a brief presentation.
Oh, okay. So I think we'll hear a little bit from planning first, and then we'll give the petitioners a minute to speak to us. So go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember. So as you mentioned, this is to discuss a text amendment to the zoning ordinance, which will allow additional height in a portion of the GMU district. It's outlined in red on this map. It's basically centered at the intersection of 600 West and 3rd South, which again is the Salt Lake Central Station or the intermodal hub. This would include privately owned properties as well as properties that are owned by the RDA and UTA. The proposal is to allow structures up to 190 feet to be permitted in the area, outlined in red. Currently, new structures are allowed up to 120 feet if approved through the design review process. It should be noted, though, that all new developments in the GMU must be approved as a planned development. This is because when the GMU zone was first adopted in the 90s, there wasn't a design review process, and so this was really the only process we had that would add a little scrutiny and have the Planning Commission review that process. Comments were requested from the Downtown Alliance as well as the Downtown Community Council. Neither group provided comments. We virtually received no comments on this item. The Planning Commission reviewed the request in October 2019 and unanimously recommended the City Council deny the request for additional height in the GMU zone. So,
Yes, Councilmember Rogers.
So tell me why the Planning Commission unanimously said that. What was it over? Was it over the height itself, or was it something else?
it is about the height, and if I go through the slide with you here, it'll kind of explain exactly what we're going for. So it was based on a number of considerations provided by staff, and they're contained in the staff report. But overall, it was based on the adopted master plan documents for that area. So on the top of the slide, it displays an image which is showing the recommendation from the city's adopted urban design element that shows downtown should be what they described as a two-sided pyramidal form, with the highest points in the central business district, and the building height should gradually step down to the south and the west. So in this showing, obviously, the central business district on the right with its greater height, and then sloping downwards as we get further and further away from the central business district. The map below shows the permitted heights in the zoning districts around there. So the map shows the highest permitted heights in the CBD at 375 feet. Currently, the permitted heights actually does, in general, follow that pyramidal height which is described before. But if we're going to allow taller structures in the subject area, it would certainly go against this recommendation from the urban design element, which was also adopted into the downtown master plan, by allowing 190 feet on the west side and between the CBD and this gateway district, only allowing 120 feet in those different downtown zoning districts. So I asked Molly to come as well, and she is going to kind of she can speak to the downtown master plan and also the street right-of-way reduction that was approved in order to develop Festival Street and how that's impacted by allowing additional height here.
Thanks, John. So the Station Center plan, which I know many of you are familiar with as also members of the RDA board, was essentially adopted into the downtown master plan. It was recognized as kind of the catalytic project for the Depot District within the downtown. And the kind of central spine of the Station Center plan was this 300 South Festival Street. Not named Festival Street, but the intent of the program of that street was that it could be shut down for festivals and other kind of programmatic events. As part of this plan, the street width was narrowed. The right-of-way was narrowed from 132 feet to about 85 feet, with the intent that the building height to the street width would be a 1-to-1 ratio. So, and then there's other supporting documents that the RDA board had, including a set of design standards and guidelines that reflected this as well in terms of the proposed development and how it would be designed under contract with RDA for the RDA properties. And those building heights were designed to be in line and reflective of that street width. As John mentioned, this area was rezoned a few years ago to GMU to be more in line with the RDA's plans for Station Center. And while the GMU full design review height of 120 feet is possible, the kind of base zoning level height is 90 feet, right?
Yes.
So the idea was that 90 feet, 85 feet, approximately about the same. The design standards also called for step backs if the building was going to be over 75 feet tall, so that kind of ratio was maintained between the street width to building height. Now, that is important for kind of the pedestrian, human scale feel of that festival street and that kind of street enclosure and the kind of aesthetic and form that the designers were aiming for in the entire development of Station Center. The other final point that I'll make is that with the diagram that John was showing about kind of the building height stepping down from the central business district, the idea behind that was that we would have a monocentric downtown, so that it was kind of very well recognized that with a concentration of the tallest buildings in the central business district, that was kind of the center, the kind of nexus of the downtown and really of Salt Lake City. And so that was reinforced with kind of this stepping down concept that was elaborated on in the downtown plan, and ultimately the zoning is intended to follow that.
So we're happy to answer any questions, or if you'd like us to step back and have the applicant speak.
Council members, any questions for planning before we ask the petitioners to step up?
Well, I'm sure they'll have some questions after we hear from the petitioners. So.
Okay. Councilmember Johnston.
This isn't related to the west side of downtown to the gateway, but going east and south. Is it the same concept, those directions?
It is for the south. The east is very specific that it shouldn't go any further than Second East and that we shouldn't have any taller buildings. If you can imagine, this urban design element came out of the 90s when there was a real fear of creep. Office buildings were starting to show up on 5th East and 7th East, so there was a very definitive line. So this plan does talk about it should step down gradually from the south and the west sides.
Same sort of ratios, you think, for us to step down, or similar?
Sorry, same sort of like building height to street width ratios, or?
Yeah, because I'm looking at a certain angle. You're looking at from essentially the intermodal hub to downtown. There's a pretty good line. Is it similar, more steep for sight lines for building height?
I mean, I would say it would be pretty similar. I don't know that there's this idea that we're going to have a perfect ratio from 375 down, and also knowing that even though you can build 375 feet, you're not required to do that. So,
sure.
But I think that the whole idea is that it's just gradual growth. If you were kind of stepping back a ways, that you could see that this is clearly the center, and that it's clearly starting to shrink as it's making its way west.
So the second question would be, if we look at the downtown and the needs, we got the University of Utah on the east, downtown, and then essentially the intermodal hub, which is a major growth area for commuters in and out of the city. Are there thoughts about what, if the market is looking for more density in that area, looking at the city kind of concept and master planning this way to reflect that, or give me a sense of what we're thinking there?
I mean, I can't really speak for the market, but I can say that there is a lot of demand for growth in that area. The Planning Commission has reviewed recently plan developments to add additional housing there, and we certainly have a lot of people coming in to talk about additional housing, and housing just seems to be what we're seeing right now. We're not seeing a lot of office and things like that. But frankly, I haven't had any discussions where they're recommending heights above the 120. Most people aren't even getting above 75 to 90 feet.
Yeah.
So this certainly would exceed what we've heard recently from developers and landowners.
Okay. I'm sensitive to the sight lines, particularly Temple Square, and I know it's a topic to be talked about elsewhere. But looking at the structure of downtown, and we have such a demand over there, I didn't know if that's in the near or far future to look at our growth patterns and how we need to look at it differently.
Maybe, and certainly you may come to a different conclusion once we start to see Station Center develop and how that neighbor changes and grows, because I think we all want to see this 24-hour, vibrant pedestrian environment. We just want to see these uses, and we want to see a mixture of uses. It's hard to determine exactly what those ratios should be right now, but I think as that neighborhood changes, then certainly the conclusions might as well.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, just a little piece of information of the CBRE study that I referenced in a thing in December said that for every 8 jobs that are being created along the Wasatch Front, there is 1 housing unit.
Thank you. Councilmember Dugan.
So this is just one small area requesting to go 190.
Yes.
What other areas would be requesting to go 190 if you go north or south from this area and ask for an exception?
So this was a privately generated petition, so we obviously had a developer who made that request for that parcel. So we're not considering other areas right now. I think that, as we mentioned, the staff found that it didn't meet those master plans that we have in mind, and so I don't know that I would say that we would want to have any specific areas that we would want to target for height that exceeds or that goes up to 190 feet.
But there's opportunities for other areas just north and south.
No.
Oh, I see. Right there. Yeah, if you.
Can you pull up the author zoning map? I feel like it has a little bit larger of a scale. So the area in kind of the brighter purple color is the GMU zone, and the maximum height that can be achieved there through the current zoning is 120 feet. That is through the Planning Commission's design review process. So as of right, you can go in and get a building permit. Well, you have to get a plan development as well. But you don't have to go through the design review process if your building is less than 90 feet, but you would have to go through up to 120. But then you can't get anything above 120 in that area.
But if you set precedence on this one, could you set precedence north of the purple area to go to 190 and further?
But there would have to be another zoning change that would come before you.
Right. But you have precedence set on this one, possibly.
You could be.
Okay.
Councilmember Valdemoros, did you have a question?
Sometimes it seems that sometimes we're stuck in certain ways and how things are changing so fast, development in our city and our needs and our goals that we have for use of public transit and make it more convenient. Sometimes I feel like we might be too rigid, and I think I would like to hear from the applicant as well. What is it exactly that they're proposing, why in this area, and see if there's any flexibility that we would consider, because we definitely welcome development, and especially so close to transit. So that's where I'm struggling a little bit. I know we have plans, and I know how we're envisioning our downtown, but things that we thought 5 years ago might not apply today, and so how can we be a little bit more flexible? So that's my initial comment.
Well, what was planning staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission?
It was to deny the text amendment.
Okay. Okay, any other questions before we hear from the applicant or the petitioners? Okay, if we want to have them step up. All right, and you have 5 minutes plus question time.
All right.
Do you want to start by introducing yourselves, please?
Sure. Yeah, I'm Nathan Ricks with Stack Real Estate. We're a developer of primarily tech-oriented office buildings. We've done a lot of work in Lehigh. We've built 14 buildings there in the last 10 years, a couple million square feet, and we understand what tech companies are looking for in terms of office space. This is Doug Tim from Architectural ArchNexus, who is architect on the project, and my partner Andrew Bybee, who will comment as well, perhaps in this session. We were the ones who put in the request of the Planning Commission to consider this text amendment to increase the height in this particular GMU portion of that GMU zone. And it was interesting during the hearing that it seemed like most of the commissioners were pretty sympathetic to the argument, but their hands were tied. And what we'd like to point out, if you'll go to the papers that we've distributed to you, if you want to turn with me to that second page, there's a map similar to what you've seen so far. This one here that's got the pink and red colors, second page in. You'll notice on the left side of that map, right against the freeway, that's kind of in a pinkish color, there's a 1/4 mile radius. And I appreciate Councilman Valdemora's comment just a moment ago about how fast things are changing. And what we want to be is we want to be sustainable, we want to be green, we want to take cars off the road, we want to create walkable, transit-oriented communities. We want to reduce air pollution, and we want to make sure that we're doing something sustainable. And that's really the basis here. If you have a 1/4 mile ring around a transit station, we feel like that should be densified as much as possible. Because the more people that can live there and work there, the more cars we're going to take off the road, and the more walkable and sustainable and healthy we make the community. And so that's kind of what that 1/4 mile ring is all about around the existing intermodal hub. We'd like to show you, as we talk about this, a little. Oh, will it go in advance? Oh, there we go. Great. Got control. Okay, so this one is the specific request on the next page. This is kind of like 2 half blocks, and all of Festival Street, running from Rio Grande on 5th West all the way to Intermodal Hub on 6th West. And we love the vision that we heard the mayor espouse in this conference 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, about attracting tech companies and lamenting that there's 6 of them at the point of the mountain and not one here in downtown Salt Lake. And we want to change that. We get that vision. We think that the existing office stock is not actually conducive to what tech companies are looking for. We think that there needs to be an area that will attract these kind of companies, that will have the kind of product they're looking for to recruit and retain the talent that is right here. And we've got a lot of people reverse commuting from downtown Salt Lake, where they live, to Lehigh, where we've built buildings to work at tech companies. If those options were here, we think a lot of those people would rather stay here, and they'd rather work here. And so we have acquired a 99-year lease on the blue portion of this map. That's 3 1/4 acres of the Nicholas family property. And we have designed a building for that. But we would actually like to talk about, the entire block. We'd like to kind of show you our vision of what we think can happen. 190 feet or 120 feet is going to limit us to 4 and 5 story, potentially 6-story residential buildings. They may not have very tall lobbies. It'll certainly limit us on an office building that has a typical 14-foot floor-to-floor height to a much smaller building, to 6 stories perhaps. Well, the market's going to likely ask for higher than that. And so this is a vision showing some buildings at 12 stories, some at 8. This is a transit stop, Central Park Station in Denver. Okay, so that's an example of something that we would hope to create. And we love the Festival Street concept that's already been approved, improvements there. We don't necessarily agree, obviously, with the height limit. We don't think the buildings have to be exactly as wide as the street is. Certainly, that's not the case in the D1 zone. We don't have 350 or 400-foot wide streets. So the human scale element that was referenced really happens in the first 20 feet of the streetscape. And so that's why we plan to address that with higher first floors, restaurants and shops lined along the first floors of these types of buildings. This is development that is just west of Union Station in Denver. You've probably all seen this or been there. 20-story buildings, residential towers, many of them. There's great office space down there, lots of vibrancy, restaurants, bars, grocery stores, everything you would need to live and sustain yourself right there. That's very much what could happen west of Rio Grande. It could be a much more dense environment that would help us be more green. This is in Tampa Bay, another image that you can see similar to Festival Street, kind of going down the middle. They've got more width there, a little bit of a plaza. But again, 12-story buildings, 8-story buildings, 15-story buildings, and 20 in the back there, maybe 20 plus. This is Portland. There's some 5-story residential there with a 10-story in the back that you can see. Transit right there. And just to make a note, most of the actual structures we've shown you are residential. And there's also a big need for office.
Yeah,
And
I need to stop you
Okay.
for just a second.
So the council's rule is to allow 5 minutes for these presentations as a matter of equity, but I've just checked with the city attorney, and she indicates that the council by majority vote could suspend its rules to allow this presentation to continue. You can keep it at 5, or you can allow it to continue.
Do I have a motion? How long? An additional 5. Okay. Okay, we have a motion to continue for 5 additional minutes. That's been seconded. We just call for a vote.
Yeah, just the thumb as a straw poll.
Yeah, straw poll. Okay, go ahead. You have an additional 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. We
Yeah.
appreciate that. We'll stay within that. This next slide is a concept that we have tried to show to a few people to expand this from the 3¼ acres of the Nicholas property that's on the northwest corner of this block 46 to include the entire block. As you are aware, the RDA owns a majority of the rest of the block. The state owns another big chunk of that block. There's one other landowner, private landowner besides ourselves. If you look in the upper left corner, that would be the proposed 12-story building that we previously had designed for that corner and for which we've submitted the text change. Next to that is a residential building with a retail on the first floor. As you come to the right along Festival Street, there's inter-block streets that break up the block. On the other corner, another 10 to 12-story building right across from the Rio Grande Depot would be proposed, anchoring the corners of these blocks with the taller buildings and stepping the building height down in the mid portion of the blocks to give it that variation and very interesting architectural design. Mid-block, you can see open space, which is on the property that we have, and we've proposed that, as tech companies want, they want a place for people to go out and recreate, play volleyball, shoot some hoops, throw a frisbee, or just get outside and relax. That's something they're looking for. If all we have is just a building and that's it, not as attractive to these companies. They got to retain and recruit and retain these employees. The bottom right corner of the screen is residential for the rest of Fifth West, and then fronting on 4th South. And then there's another proposed smaller, shorter building in the bottom left corner would be an office. And the kind of orange in between those two buildings along 6th West would be a hotel that we would propose. They're 120-room hotel right across from the station. So the big piece on the south of the block there is a joint parking structure so we can share parking. We can share parking between residential, between hotel, and between office, so we make really good use of the kind of parking. That parking is suggested to be pushed up against the viaduct, which is the least desirable part of the block, so that we could kind of hide one side with the viaduct, and then we front the other sides of it with really nice kind of brownstone townhome type product that's makes a really nice street right through the middle there. If you look at Market Street, bisecting the block. Got brownstones on both sides of that, an open green park, coming down towards the station. And so this is what should be done. It's interesting that you can go, okay, well, we could build on the 3¼ acres we have and just do something, but we get one chance to do this. And we're within that quarter-mile ring, and we really think that over time, if you look at Denver, you look at Portland, you look at Vancouver, you look at Dallas, you look at all these cities, there's not height restrictions around the TOD sites. Wherever there's a functioning front runner or in our case, front runner or track station, you see these little, jutting up of height and density around those stations, and that's the way it should be. We should take advantage of the literally massive investment that the state and UTA have made in transit so that we can green it up, and we can reduce cars on the road, we can improve air quality, and we can make more walkable, transit-oriented communities. And that's really our goal at Stack Real Estate. We're focused on that. We've worked on 3 of these already, and we hope to work on many more with UTA.
Council members, questions for the petitioners? Councilmember Valdemars.
Thank you, sorry. Is this project not feasible if you did get 120 feet instead of 190? Like, is this a done deal?
It's just more market driven. If you look at the very front page of what we've handed out to you, that was a unicorn. That's a company that's based here in Utah that's valued at well over $1 billion. They just raised money from Insight Partners that more than $1 billion valuation. They're mentioned in every fintech conference. I mean, this is a great company. And we brought the CEO here into the city, and we said, hey, can we move quick? Can we get the building these guys want? They want a 12-story building. It's 190 feet in height. And, we had them, and they came and said, we want to be here. And what happened is we ran into the whole zone text change issue, and they've gone. They're going to a different location because we couldn't meet their delivery timeline.
And this is Galileo that did?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Whoa.
That's our 10 minutes.
Damn. Okay.
Does that answer your question? Not really.
Yes and no.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I understand, but
So bottom line is it's market driven, and when these companies show up, we've got to be ready. That's why we're continuing through this process, even though we've lost this particular tenant that wanted to build that beautiful building right across from the station, because we need to be ready for the next one. And we've got to make sure that we can hit the timelines, and they're aggressive timelines typically. And these buildings like that are minimum 20 months to construct.
Yeah.
Right? And so the last thing we wanted to say is we want to pursue this through. We would recommend and hope you'd support us in approving this change, schedule a public hearing where you could approve this text amendment so that we can at least start there. Let's get ready so we can do 10 and 12-story buildings. And then as people get more comfortable, we can pursue maybe a bigger TOD type plan. Maybe you guys can work with UTA and you can figure out that whole area, and we can say, great, 20 stories, great. It shouldn't be the zoning that limits, it ought to be the market that limits how high people want to go and what they want to do. And I'm a believer that the big ones, the Googles, the Amazons, the tech companies that are out there that are expanding in New York and DC and Toronto and like Seattle and Austin, Texas, and these people have run out of talent in the Bay Area, so they're making billions of dollars investments in these cities. We should be on that list. We should be ready so that we're welcoming and we're like, yeah, we're ready for you guys. We want you to come here.
Councilmember Johnston.
Thanks for the presentation and the handouts. I hear what you're saying about being ready and responding to the market, essentially. Talk to me about sunshine, about livability, about streetscapes. I mean, the zoning was set up for sight lines to some extent for the city. But I think there are things that could be different to live in the place. A 12-story building angled the way you are doesn't block sunshine in the wintertime for a third west as much as you'd anticipate, right? If you ran it east-west, it would completely block the entire street. But talk to me about the trade-offs there with a 12-story solid building on the corner versus something with a platform and a different sort of design module there?
Yeah, if you, and I appreciate the question. If you look at even the central business district, there's a lot of housing that's happening. There's a lot of tall buildings, a lot taller than we're proposing. And there's more tall residential buildings coming now. And that's not seeming to really slow people down, that they feel like it's dark on one side for 4 or 5 hours of the day when they're awake. You know, there's a big need for housing. But what we have found at South Jordan, at Lehigh, at Sandy, where we've already built these transit-oriented developments, is that the office component is a critical thing, because that's the constant where people commute to every day. And so we need to have buildings that meet market need. Those could be tall. They could block sunshine for a part of the day. But if you have these pocket parks that we've suggested on this full block design, you have open spaces where people can actually congregate, where we get a break from that density, then that really creates the livability of the actual developments. You know, those pocket parks and those open spaces, even small quarter-acre pieces and stuff, really important in terms of just keeping that vegetation, the greenery, the human scale.
If I could interject, I'm sorry to interrupt, I hope it's okay, but if I could interject, just in terms of urban design and what is being built into the block design, let's say for this proposal, is similar to downtown, where we're placing taller buildings actually anchoring the corners, and then the mid-block areas are actually receded in height down to 100 feet, allowing sunlight to get through in the center block areas while still keeping the corners anchored. And so we kind of get the best of both worlds is a way you could look at it. The whole idea of creating human scale elements down at 20 feet above the sidewalk plane and having glass lines along there make it very livable. It also is right in line with allowing for residential development to happen, so there's 24/7 enlivenment that happens in terms of livability.
Councilmember Dugan.
So a 10-story building, is that 160 feet?
Approximately, yeah. Depends what you do on the roof. So, yeah.
Right. And you have 2,000 stalls for cars?
Correct.
Are these people going to own cars?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, we're in this kind of strange spot in Utah right now where people still drive their car to work a lot, but as they get more and more used to transit because it's convenient and it's close to them, it starts to change. And so then future development in the area can continue to use the stalls that are constructed as people ride the train more and more and more. So we've had that same issue in South Jordan. We just completed those 2 new buildings right on I-15 that are the In-Moment and Lucid building and the Avanti building. And there's a hotel there. So all of that on 12 acres, you know, 360,000 feet of office, 192 rooms, and we have 2,000 parking stalls there. And over time, that usage of parking will drop over time, we believe, because of Front Runner. So we can build more buildings and have less parking.
Councilmember Rogers.
My question is, if I look at this map and the current lease that you have on the property is, if I look at your plan here, is for the 12-story office. I'm looking at this one here, the one you've got up.
Right.
So you've got basically the 2-story office parking, the 6-story mixed-use residential for retail, the open space, the 7-story hotel, and then the 3-story super block shared parking structure, right?
Correct.
That's currently what you have under.
Well, we would like to do that. We don't control all that land.
But I'm just talking about the land.
That is what we
currently.
do control.
That's what you
correct.
Oh, I'm
do
sorry.
control.
On the corner piece, we do control, yeah.
So my question is, I think for me moving forward, this is such a big project, right, that you're looking for, and a lot of this is RDA-owned land, I believe. And for me, I mean, I love what we're looking at here. To me, we've got to look at legally to see if we're causing ourselves any issues for the rest of the downtown master plan area if we were to do a text amendment, looking at that moving forward. But for me, moving forward, I think that if you're looking at residential, you're looking at the bigger picture like we're always trying to look for. I think that in order for us to to make this happen, we're going to have to look at some sort of affordability component too with the housing, right? And for me, I would love to see us sit down with the RDA, discuss this, figure out a way to move this forward, because currently in Station Center, I know we've got investment money that we're looking at throwing out there, and I'm looking at RDA people, but do we currently have any permits on hand for Station Center? Is there anything? We don't have a current building plan at all in Station Center, and we're talking about catalytic projects, right? So for me, it would be imperative for us to look at, with the RDA, and looking at making something happen with this project so that it does spur that catalytic development that we're looking at. So I don't want to say that, hey, let's look at it and kick it back, but for me personally, I think we need to look at the RDA and bring them to the table to look at what we can do legally, as well as make this project in Station Center really carry forward. I mean, for me, if we go back to the quarter-mile map, the Rio Grande building isn't going anywhere. It's 50 feet tall, so there's nothing that, if you're looking at it, that's going to be blocked there. And if you're looking to the west, it's the intermodal hub, right? So I think this is what we're looking at, but I want to get back to, like I said, to the legal questions and what we're doing if we're going to cause some more problems than it's worth, but also get back to the RDA and focus on this bigger project.
Just
Thank you.
one quick point of clarification. We're showing you a whole block design just for purposes of if we can bring all the parties together and develop one block at one time all together. We know that we control 3.24 acres and we can do what we want to do on just our piece. There's just trade-offs.
Right. And for me, I mean, you looked at Block 67. Yeah, it was extremely difficult, but that's just the way it was thrown at us. And here, it doesn't have to be difficult. We can sit down and I think look at ways to push it forward.
And I think that the previous zoning, it's just interesting as I've been reading through the station area plan and reading the UTA approved, portion that they worked with the city council and Salt Lake City on that plan. I believe the vision of that was approved last quarter of 18, and the UTA board approved it the first quarter of 19. And that vision included a lot of renderings of 12-story UTA buildings right across the street from this site. And so I think there's the vision maybe is a little ahead of the actual zoning code. It's kind of like we just need to do this text amendment so at least we can get ready. We don't want to miss another one of these because they don't come along every day. And we need to be able to perform. We need to be able to literally come in and pull a permit because the zoning's all done. And we can go, you bet. We know what the timelines are. These companies have leases that are expiring where they're currently at. They've got windows we have to meet. I mean, there's a lot of timelines and a lot of financial commitments that have to happen.
So this is sort of in the same area where there was once a study from Downtown Alliance about the public market there. Danny, do you know how this would fit in with that, or how this would affect that study?
With regard specifically to the public market, that site is on the north side of 300 South. It would be the southeast corner of the block above this one.
Oh, okay, so this wouldn't, wait, hold on. So this would interfere with the plan for the public market or would not?
This is just showing the southern block, correct?
Right.
Between 3rd and 4th South?
Right.
So the public market would be right on the top edge of the screen there.
We can go to that.
Oh.
On the block to the north.
Boop. Okay. Okay, so wouldn't necessarily interfere. Okay. Okay.
To your question, the height change would then obviously incorporate that block and that site that you're speaking of.
Okay. Council members, do you have any other questions or? I'm interested to know if we talked with planning about how this particular project intersected with the nodes and transit nodes, and whether this is something that we would want to explore further. Yeah. Do you want to speak to that, or? Just if we would have a briefing on how, if we approved this, You know, there's sort of an intersection of an area that's planned, but is also a transit node. What planning's thoughts would be on that?
About holding a briefing on that?
Yes.
Absolutely, we're fine with doing that.
Okay.
And for me, Mr. Chair, I guess it would be based a lot of on height basis, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
of
looking
course.
at that node and figuring out what's typical process and how we're willing to look at, giving people more height if they're willing to do, X, Y, Z. So.
Councilmember Fowler.
So and this is for our applicants. Andrew, you mentioned that this was sort of a master plan for the entire block. I'm curious, and yet we have, what you're saying, what I'm hearing is we need to get this text amendment done so we can pull a permit and be ready, right? And so I'm assuming, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming you mean just for this building here on the front of the packet you gave us, because clearly you can't pull a permit on land that you don't own. So
For sure.
the rest of the block is, and the other property. So you want this text amendment for this project right here.
That's
And then you have this great vision of what the rest of it could look like, with this being sort of the catalyst to the rest of the vision.
Exactly. Correct. Yeah.
Well, and it wouldn't make sense from a planning standpoint, though, to just have one corner. I mean, we needed to look at it holistically, and we wanted to look at what's happening with Festival Street and this whole district. And so we felt it was important to look beyond just this one corner site.
So would you be coming back to us on the other corners, or do you?
Well, again, we control the 3.24, so we would, if we get the zone text amendment approval green light, then we would do what Amy has, Councilmember Rogers and Councilmember had said, meeting with the RDA and the other landowners and saying, okay, what do we do here from a block standpoint? The feedback we got from the CEO when we came in from Galileo was, what's happening on the rest of the block and when is that going to develop? I don't want to be an island. I don't want to be the only thing there for the next 10 years. What's the timing of it, and what are you going to do? And so we want to provide answers. We need to provide answers to these tenants on those questions as much as having a site ready.
The advantage of the full block design is that we have that really nice park in the middle that if we don't do that and it's just our parcel, then it gets consumed in a whole parking structure so we can park the building, And that's the advantage of, like, when the CEOs come in and these tech companies, they're asking, what are the amenities, what's the green space, where can I eat, where do my people go? I mean, transit's solved, it's right there. They can get people there from up and down the Wasatch Front, easy.
Okay. Councilmember Valdemoros.
From what I hear, I mean, we District 4 welcomes development, and as a planner, the planners have gone through great lengths in putting these plans together and going through a whole process. So these properties here have been zoned a certain way for a long time. So it seems like, I'm not sure, maybe I'm mistaken, but it seems like there was no, asking the other property owners that already know what they have in store from you guys to say, hey, we're planning on this, what do you guys think? And can we kind of package it together as a group so that we can get this height, this height that we need? Because right now it seems like you have a holistic, vision, and that's great, but we already have plans for that area. And that's okay, like we can work them together, but it seems like we're doing this just the one, and we don't know if anything else is gonna happen. So what do you say to that?
I'll let Andrew address that about adjacent property owners and so forth.
So we started working on this particular site about 2 years ago on trying to assimilate the land, and about a year ago is when we had the attention of the tenant itself. That's when we started having regular conversations with RDA and how can we do this on a block nature and answer these kind of questions and what's going on in the neighborhood, and trying to do exactly what you're talking about of bring a neighborhood along, not just a corner, but at the same time realizing that the catalyst is whatever the market wants to build now, which was the office building in the corner. So we very much are in favor of sitting down as neighbors and as RDA and coming to a plan that makes sense for the neighborhood, not just a corner. But we do see that corner as the catalyst. And when we submitted this application, it was July? August?
July, I think.
And that's when we literally had the tenant, I mean, we were in lease negotiations, ready to do the deal. It wasn't until the timing, the realization that the timing was just not going to be met, that the CEO said, sorry, I'm out. And we were already in the queue going through this process. So.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Sorry. Molly Robinson.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just wanted to clarify to your question, Councilmember Valdemars. The proposal is not just for the single parcel. It is for all of the parcels that front along 3rd South in that section. So they have thought comprehensively about beyond just the parcel that they have an option on, but the larger area. So we are thinking larger than that, though it would not impact all of the GMU. And I think the other point that I wanted to clarify as well is that at the request of the RDA, within the last
2 days,
few years, like with a couple of years, 3-4 years maybe, time runs together, that is when it was rezoned to GMU to match the station center, the original station center plan, formerly called the intermodal hub plan, formerly called the depot district plan. I mean, it has gone through iteration after iteration after iteration. So there is a newer, larger station center plan that it thinks beyond just these RDA-owned properties that was done in conjunction with UTA in 2018. But I was earlier referring to the previous plans that just the RDA did for the RDA properties, and thinking comprehensively about those two blocks in particular.
And Mr. Chairman, I follow up with something from the staff report that is from the RDA. RDA staff would encourage the council to consider maintaining the existing minimum building height requirements in the GMU zone and increasing maximum permitted building height. The human scale pedestrian environment could be maintained by requiring or encouraging building setbacks once a certain height is reached. The RDA would encourage the council to reconsider the proposed boundary for the proposed height. It is not apparent how the boundary was chosen, and the RDA owns vacant properties to the immediate north and south that could benefit from an increased height allowance. It may make sense for the council to explore the feasibility of permitting additional building height, therefore density, in more parts of the GMU zone, especially areas closer to I-15 and the intermodal hub.
Cindy Gus Jensen.
I just want to check with the council here, based on all of your comments. I just want to run this by you, combining your comments with the Planning Commission recommendation. So try to frame the planning briefing a little bit. In a way, it sounds like this text amendment proposal, without further discussion, it could be, and it sounds like you are going to have further discussion, so that's good, but it could be looked at as almost amending the whole plan for Salt Lake City by approving, if you were to just approve this text amendment without a comprehensive discussion. So I think it's great for you to have a discussion, and then so maybe we could ask planning to address that, because they're in an awkward spot needing to come in and have a discussion when they have their direction from the Planning Commission. But if we ask them, give us your thoughts on that. And then also, the other thing I heard was the transit station area height. How can that relate to the downtown height? And is there room for transit area corners and such to be taller than is allowed? So then just balancing the city's overall planning with this request and the idea of the nodes by the transit stations. Is there any part of that, what I said, that makes sense?
Yes.
You could say no, huh?
It's a yes for me. Any other questions?
I guess the adjacent property owners, Molly, have you had conversations with them about this proposal? I mean, about their proposal and also about the height increase of their properties if we were to approve this?
Adjacent property owners beside the RDA or
Right,
the
like
property
I
owners to the
don't
north?
know who the adjacent property owners are.
I
for-
don't believe that there were
It's right
any-
here on the screen. Probably hard to read. So there's only one other private property owner on the block.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's like 10 parcels here next
Yeah.
to you guys. Who owns that? Is it the RDA?
Of all the private parcels,
If you look at the second to last page of your packet, you'll see that same map that might be a little more legible. My apologies for that.
Pretty much the RDA in the state of Utah. All right. So,
And
And then across Festival Street, it's also the RDA,
okay.
which would be part of the zone text amendment. Just-
So then definitely we have to have a meeting with the RDA.
And Mr. Chair, also the packet, the council staff report packet contains this map as well. That's the 2 blocks.
Then yes, I would like to meet as RDA, as adjacent property owners, and talk about this, how it affects us.
For council purposes, do we want to make an emotion about this? What, or straw poll, excuse me?
Make a motion for what?
Do we want to make the motion to have, to straw poll the briefing and straw poll the kicking it to the RDA?
Yeah, I like that straw poll. I'm in favor of it.
I didn't propose it as a question.
I think, so, no, I think yes, is to have an additional or further conversation with the RDA as adjacent property owners. I think what James was saying earlier about, James, you were talking about trans-oriented development and additional, and additional requests or briefings that we may have if this was to pass.
Okay.
And what else? There's a third thing. And a briefing. Because right now we can set another briefing. Okay. And set another briefing.
Yeah. Okay. Did everyone understand that straw poll is proposed? Okay. All in favor? Okay. Thank you. We will be.
As staff, what I think we're doing is coordinating with the RDA chair and staff to either set up small group meetings or a board agenda item. And then also we are setting up time with planning for them to come back for the briefing that you've talked about. And then from there, what would happen is the petition would be open, and the goal would be to get those pieces of information together so that the council can determine when to set a hearing, that type of a thing.
Okay.
Well, you can. The hard part is that sometimes it takes a little bit of time just based on your schedules to get that information or get you into those meetings. It's up to you. I mean, you probably need to be safe to set it. You couldn't set it any earlier than the last meeting in February, probably. That would probably be pushing it, but.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I just would prefer to get it on a calendar, even if it's out a little bit, so that we can have a hearing, like a placeholder of some sort.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I think that it's a decision that needs to be made. There's a bunch of other policy issues involved in this, but in my opinion, I'm not opposed to more density and higher height, but there is some information we need to get, and there's certainly some policy questions that we need to have answered. But the question itself of the text amendment, I think at least we could put on a couple of months down the road. That would be my suggestion, to at least put a placeholder hearing of 2-3 months, whatever timing I think staff would say was most, probably most appropriate.
Okay.
Or at least put a pin in it and say that we're going to really set that hearing date sometime soon.
Well, what we could do is, we have to check on the advertising. We can do that quickly. I don't think we have tonight we don't have any action meeting. So we can come back to you with the advertising information, and then we'll check with RDA staff and planning staff, and set it probably for sometime in February or early March.
Okay.
You'll decide.
Okay. Councilmember Johnson?
I think the policy issues are much deeper than it feels at this point. So I'm okay setting a date to get us moving on this. I think it's a much broader conversation because the implications across the entire city in a lot of ways. So that's what I'm concerned about, rushing it anyway.
Okay. So do you feel like March would be too soon?
This is a planning discussion, so does planning staff have time to devote all their time to this, essentially, or part of it? It's a big question about what city staff can do in the meantime to help us understand.
And just to clarify, Mr. Chair, at some point, an ordinance has to be written.
Right.
And the planning commission is going to have to take another look at it.
Okay. So yeah, that's what there's so many things there, so.
Or, yeah. Okay. Okay. All right. Sounds good. Kate, thank you, Mr. Ricks, Mr. Tim, and Mr. Bybee.
Well, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much. And as this goes on, please know that the applicant stands ready to participate in any way that would be of help to the city.
Great, thank you. Appreciate that. All right, next on our agenda is, let's see, informational briefing from Rocky Mountain Power. Hello. So we have Jeff Barrett from Rocky Mountain Power's Regional Business Manager, and then also Nick Tarbett from City Council staff. Yeah, James had to leave, so okay. We're running a little bit behind, so Nick, do you want to start us off?
I really have nothing to offer for this briefing. I just called Jeff and asked if he could be here, and he sent us the information, so I'll let Jeff take it and give the briefing. Council can ask questions, whatever.
Okay, go for it.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Barrett. I'm with Rocky Mountain Power. I'm the relatively new regional business manager for Salt Lake City, and I can talk a little bit about what that role is, especially for those of you who are new. For those of you who aren't new, my predecessors in recent years have been most recently Chad Ambrose, who was in the position for about 9 months, and before that for, more than a decade, I don't know how much more, Aline Bentley. What we do for the company in the city to which we're assigned and is everything from kind of coordinate outages, coordinate between sort of our engineers and your engineers and planners when it comes to undergrounding a line or, the requirements of new development or other, expansions, moving a line when a road is changed or something like that. And so that type of thing. Also charitable giving, policy stuff, working with the sustainability team here at the city. Working closely with them. So that's kind of what I do, and I'm relatively new to this. And I just wanted to take a few minutes to give you an update both on kind of our service profile in the city, and I've talked a little bit to the chair and to Andrew about this, the vice chair, sorry. But I'll go over it again briefly, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to stop me. And then I want to go over our 20-year integrated resource plan, which in its totality is pretty dry. I'll focus on the renewables piece, which I think is maybe of interest to you. And you can ask me any questions that you want on that. I'm pretty conversant with it. Okay, so in Salt Lake City, we serve 95,000 customers, 96,000 really. And Salt Lake City consumes 3.2 million kilowatt hours of energy a year. So your peak load is like 800 or 900 megawatts, which is about 13% of Utah's total load, which is 42. Utah's total load is about 42% of our total system load, just to give you a sense of how Salt Lake City fits into the bigger picture. 2/3 of the load in Salt Lake City, certainly not 2/3 of the customers, but 2/3 of the load of the electrical load is commercial. And then the remaining load is roughly split between industrial and residential customers. The next bullet here is the municipal energy sales tax, which is a up to 6% tax that we layer onto our rates in a line item where it calls it out, where customers essentially pay 6% on top of their energy bill, and we receive that and pass it on to the cities where we serve, minus an administrative fee that is marginal. And that comes to about $16.35 million a year for Salt Lake City. That was the 2018 figure. We provide a lot of incentives. We've got what we call our customer solutions department, and so we have, and it's part of our integrated resource plan, which I'll get to in a few minutes, we have targets that are identified by our regulators, but they're not arbitrarily identified by our regulators. They're identified, the targets for energy efficiency investment are identified on a sort of based on a cost metric to fit into our broader resource portfolio. And so in a typical year in Utah, we might try to, we have targets for megawatt hours saved, and we spend in the most cost-effective ways to achieve those goals. And we spend about $4.6 million a year on those incentives, and we save a bunch of energy costs for the customers who receive those incentives. Salt Lake City received about $30,000 in incentives for its facilities from us just in 2018. And so I think that was a bit of an outlier. It was a big year for incentives, but we could focus more on that if we wanted to in the future. I thought that you might be interested in seeing the level of participation in our voluntary renewable energy programs. It's low, or at least it'll appear low to you. It's actually high, by comparison with other municipalities. But 4% of commercial and industrial customers participate in those elective programs, and about 12% of residential customers. And then you'll see below that about 2.6% of customers in the city have rooftop solar, which we effectively subsidize through our net metering program, which is a program that we could talk about. I mean, that's a 3-hour presentation if you'd like to schedule me for that on a different day.
What's a typical number for commercial, industrial, and residential for a city? You said that they look low, but they're actually high.
So in Utah, and I'm not familiar with how this plays out, the programs are slightly different in our Pacific states, for example, but about half that.
Okay.
About half those percentages is more typical, maybe slightly less than half. And it's interesting. We look at these numbers sometimes and think about them in the context of HB 411, the Community Renewable Energy Act, which is an opt-out program. And there's a big delta. We don't know, and we're waiting for the city to really make an assessment of what they believe the opt-out rate will look like for that program. And, I would never come into this room and suggest to you that it's going to be 88% residential opt-out. But what is that number? And what does the fact that only 12% of residential customers in Salt Lake City have opted have elected to pay a little bit more for renewables? What does that say, if anything, about what that opt-out's going to look like? And I don't know the answer to that question, but it's something that I think we need the city's input on that at some point. And there's a process that's going to play out over the next 12 months or so that'll help us get there, I think. And then I just wanted to sort of talk about the people who run our foundation, and then I do some, this first line, the $337,000, that's a foundation that we run, and I kind of administer it for Salt Lake City. And then the RMP contributions, that's the money that I put out through contributions to various events or activities or programs that nonprofits do. And I just wanted to highlight for you what some of those are. I mean, this is maybe 20% of the, or probably more than that, maybe a third of the organizations that we support in a given year. So I just highlighted a few that you might care about. Does anyone have any questions about what I've shared here before we move on? I mean, we could go in a lot of different directions. I just wanted to kind of give a snapshot of our service.
Council members, any questions at this point? Okay, keep going.
Okay. The integrated resource plan, so I call it the 20-year plan because I don't want to burden you with the phrase, and then I've done it nevertheless. It's a process that we undertake every 2 years, but really we undertake it every year because we produce an integrated resource plan on a 2-year cycle, but every off year we produce an update to that plan, which doesn't create all kinds of different modeling scenarios. It retains the ones from the integrated resource plan that it's updating, but it just sort of updates the data based on new wholesale energy forecasts, natural gas price forecasts, and other risk adjustments and things. So every 2 years we do this process, and it takes most of the 2 years, and it's an intensive process with dozens of stakeholders across 6 states. We do a detailed analysis of all the resources available to us, of all the associated transmission that might be required to build those resources out, and how the burden of that transmission cost would affect the viability of that resource or the desirability of that resource. We have load forecasts for all of our different states and all of our different customer classes in those states. We take into account all kinds of risk, weather forecasts, market forecasts, carbon pricing potentials, and really there are thousands of data points that go into any given model run, and we do dozens of those model runs, and we try to identify ones that really help us tell a story about the futures that we might think are coming our way, what the needs of the various states are and the jurisdictions within those states, and then we start to produce iterations. And at the end of the day, the result is what we call a preferred portfolio, which maps out the resources that we're going to build over the coming 2 decades. Because in a 20-year period, the 20-year planning period, you're going to produce 10 IRPs, each of which is going to modify the last in ways that are not insignificant. The latter 15 years of that 20-year plan are very much up in the air. But the first 5 years, we put an action plan together for those, and we, in many cases, within a month of publishing the IRP or a couple of months of publishing the IRP, we're issuing RFPs to procure the resources that we've identified in those plans. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the 5-year plan because it's real, because people are working on it now on the nights and weekends, and if they don't deliver the resources I'm about to describe, they won't get their bonuses in 2021, 2022. I mean, it's very real for us going after these resources. And of course, we have to get them approved at all of our commissions, but this is a serious proposition for us. So in 2020, our generation portfolio on a capacity basis, not an energy basis, is about 30% coal. That's where we are today, which is about 5,700 megawatts of coal on our system of about 15,500 megawatts of total resources owned and non-owned, because we contract on a long-term basis for certain resources. Gas makes up 20% of our portfolio today. Renewables make up 24%. Hydro 5%, and then efficiency investments, essentially direct load control, and purchases make up the remainder of our capacity portfolio, the way we serve our customers. Over the next 4 years, so by the end of 2023, we're going to acquire 6,500 megawatts of new renewables, which will more than double the current renewable portfolio that we have, and about triple the portfolio of owned renewables that we have, assuming that we own most of the resources that we build out in that 6,500 megawatts. It could be a mix of owned and non-owned. So it's a significant investment. It's more significant than just about any utility plan for renewable adoption and the acceleration of renewable adoption that I've seen anywhere. So 3,500 megawatts of new wind and 3,000 megawatts of new solar in the next 4 years. And the 4 years is valuable. I said it was a 5-year plan, but now I'm talking 4 years. The 4 years is because that's the current calendar by which a lot of the federal incentives go away. So we've got to deliver the resources that our plan tells us are the best resources for our customers. We got to deliver them not in a 5-year window, but in a 4-year window in order for them to be as cost effective as we think they ought to be. 3,000 megawatts of new solar, and then for every 100 megawatts of new solar we put on the system, we're going to add 20 megawatts of coincident storage product, probably lithium-ion batteries, so that when the production curve of solar, whereas wind, the production curve looks like this, it's very erratic throughout the whole course of the day. Solar is not erratic, it goes like this. And our load, whereas solar goes like this, our load is here, right when solar drops off, our peak load for the day. And so the value of those batteries with solar, coincident with solar, is that we're able to essentially shave off the top of that load production of that resource and shift it forward a couple of hours to coincide with the time of day where it's most valuable to our customers. So we're thinking about how to best deploy these newer technologies to benefit our customers. So over the next 20 years, the number of new renewable resources is more like, 11,000 megawatts in total. That's inclusive of the 6,500 in the first 5 years, and then significant battery storage. I don't speak to new coal here because there will never be new coal. I don't speak to new gas here because I came here to get you excited about renewable energy, but we do have plans to build new gas in the future. Nowhere in the next 5-7 years, but maybe in the next 8 to 10. The gas that we will build in the future, assuming we do build it, assuming that lithium-ion batteries don't just take over our planning in the next 2 or 3 IRP cycles, assuming we build this gas, it'll be what we call peaker plants, as opposed to baseload plants. In other words, there'll be plants that exist purely or really only to support the renewables on our system. So that they're relatively inefficient gas generators, but the value of them is that they're essentially jet pilot engines that just sit on the ground and you push gas through them and they can be ramped up really fast so that when a resource, when that cloud passes over, southwestern Utah, we can ramp that thing up really quickly before the voltage on our system sags. So the point of those gas units isn't to burn a bunch of gas, it's to generate maybe 10% of the hours in the air as opposed to the 60 to 80% that a typical gas unit would have historically. And so they may be a significant portion of our capacity picture in the future, but not a significant portion of our energy picture because they won't operate a lot. So back to coal. So coal, what we're going to be doing in the coming decade is retiring a lot of it. And in the next 5 years, we've accelerated the retirement of 1,500 megawatts of coal. About 1,100 of those 1,500 megawatts are actually accelerating into that 5-year period. And then other of those units, we might be accelerating them from like the early 2030s to closure in the late 2020s kind of thing, like 20. And so we're accelerating them into the planning period, and in many cases 5 to 7 years ahead of where we thought we'd retire them just 2 years ago. So 1,500 megawatts of 5,700 megawatts of coal today is not insignificant, especially not when during the same period you're building 6,500 megawatts of new renewables. Now you have to keep in mind, renewables operate 25 to 40% of the hours in the day, and coal might operate 3 times that. So 6,500 megawatts of renewables might look about like 2,000 megawatts of coal. So it really is a similar, we're about building to replace what we're retiring in coal. And over the next 20 years, what is this? By 2038, so the end of the planning period, we'll have retired 75% of our fleet. Now, I want to emphasize when I say that, that's 20 years out. We're saying now in the 2019 IRP that we're going to have retired 75% of our coal generation within the next 20 years, and that essentially the Utah coal plants will be the only ones left on the system. I think maybe one unit in Wyoming. It's smaller. It's near the border with Dakota. We've got a lot of IRPs between now and 2038, and the pressures that exist that have produced the 1,500 megawatts of acceleration in the next 5 years are not flattening, they're accelerating. And so if you were to ask me off the record whether I thought these numbers would change and whether coal would be accelerated further, I would say probably so. But we try not to be too cavalier with those types of forecasts because people's lives are at stake and communities. I mean, we essentially operate a bunch of company towns throughout southeastern Utah, southwestern Wyoming, and other parts of the Intermountain West. And these are folks' livelihoods, and a lot of them, their careers are going to be cut short. And you don't replace a coal job with a solar job. It just doesn't happen. There aren't, for 1,000 megawatts of coal, you're talking 400 jobs, and for 1,000 megawatts of solar, you're talking 2. So these are serious concerns that we have, and there are obviously political pressures and anxieties that our legislators have in the various states in which we operate. We serve customers in 6 states, but we operate assets in 9. And so we've got to navigate the politics in all 9 of those states where we have assets, pay property taxes, pay employees. But the market is what the market is, and it's saying accelerate the construction of renewables and accelerate closure of coal. And so I just wanted to update you on that. By 2038, our current plan has us at 46% renewable and 5% coal, and increasingly relying on energy efficiency investments and direct load control. Direct load control being like a Cool Keeper program, where if the peak load is occurring and we have the choice between ramping up a costly gas peaker unit or just flipping a switch and turning off all your air conditioners, we'll do that first. And we'll save everyone money for having made that decision. Emissions reductions by 2025, under our current plan, and again, there will be another couple of plans between now and then, but under our current plan, we'll have seen 43% emissions reductions against a 2005 baseline. And that 2005 baseline seems arbitrary, and I guess it is, but it's not. Our use of it is not arbitrary because the IPCC and others use that to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and others use the 2005 metric in the Paris talks and stuff. I don't know why they do it, but so using that as a baseline, 43% reductions of carbon emissions by 2025. This isn't NOx or SOx or anything. This is carbon. And 59% by 2030, and you can see by 2050, 90% reduction in carbon emissions. So that's what I wanted to share. I've got a bunch of other stuff that I could talk about. I could answer questions about. There's some cool stuff that we're doing with UTA on managing its loads at the intermodal hub in a way that kind of reduces emissions and reduces peak loads, and it's super AI intensive and fascinating. We're doing a lot of investments in electric vehicle infrastructure, 1,000 level 2 chargers in Utah in the last couple of years, and 55 level 3 DC fast chargers that are facilitating movement across the state and neighboring states on the interstates in a way that we've never been able to count on before in our electric vehicles. And so we're really focused on that for air quality and also selfish reasons. It's nice to sell electricity to electric car owners. But yeah, so that's kind of where our focuses are, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have about this or anything else. And before I finish, Chair.
Yes.
I had a number of follow-ups that I promised you. This is one of those, if you'll recall.
Yes.
The renewable energy kind of summary of the IRP. So that's one. And we can talk about the others. And I don't know if you'd prefer this setting for that or another, but we can talk about the others.
I'll let my colleagues go first before I jump in. Councilmember Dugan.
So 65% of the usage is commercial. So what incentives are you doing with the commercial side and the industrial side to lower their energy use?
So I am not an expert on that. And if you want one, we've got plenty. But I can kind of describe to you what that looks like. We have a team of what we call our customer solutions people. They manage programs, but then we have engineers that are external third-party engineers who are experts in, cooling systems, industrial motors, different types of industrial processes and commercial. And with commercial, it's more just space heating and cooling and that kind of thing, but who are experts on HVAC and other things. And we send them out. We basically say, go forth, meet with our commercial customers, prioritize by the larger loads because that's the bigger bang for your buck, and help them identify projects. If they identify projects and bring them to you, help them refine those projects, and then we do sort of a utility cost tests to see, what's the energy reduction value that we're going to get out of that commercial project, and then we just pay for a large portion of it. So if it's a $100,000 project, we might say the value of that project to our customers is $44,000. If you can kick in the other 66, 100, then or 60, I don't know what my original figure was. Then we're good. And they go back to their finance people and they decide whether it makes sense to them. But we essentially accelerate the payback by just putting money on the line. And then we track the savings associated with that project going forward, and we use that to meet our energy efficiency goals. And so we'll spend money on any project if it makes.
Are you being successful in all that? I mean,
yeah, we're very
on the commercial
successful.
side?
Yeah, we even have programs, and this will surprise you. It surprised me when I first learned about it. If you are a large enough customer that you can meet a certain threshold for, constantly, throughout the year, you can have 1 million kilowatt hours of energy savings projects in our queue for incentives. If you can meet that threshold, then we'll pay your energy manager. We'll pay their salary. You identify what that salary is, we'll pay it. And there are only about a half a dozen customers that are large enough to have that much by way of efficiency projects in our queue at a given time. But for those customers, we pay a salary for their employee just so they can bring us projects to achieve efficiency savings. So yeah, we're having great success.
Thanks.
I just want to ask for some clarification on, a lot of my residents are very concerned about the old power lines in the upper avenues, and about fire. My understanding is that they've had meetings with Rocky Mountain, that I think it would be fair to say that while Rocky is concerned, that they feel that the threat is less imminent than the neighbors do. Mm-hmm. Would that be fair? Well,
I can speak to the question generally. I don't want to.
That's what the neighbors would
assess.
Say.
Yeah.
So, and that because of the risk, that it should be Rocky Mountain should prioritize burying those lines. So I just want to get some clarity from you about where those discussions are, or where Rocky's position is on that.
Yeah. So we bury lines for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. Fire risk is not one of them. All right. So they're normally aesthetic, economic development, fire safety, access for fire trucks, et cetera. What we do for fire risk is we harden the infrastructure. There are ways to invest in new types of lines that are insulated, and other types of new types of fuses that are not combustible fuses. So there are ways to invest. If you were to ask any utility guy around the country, how do you address fire risk? You don't address it by making the infrastructure 4 times as expensive as it was the day before. You address it by making it 2 times as expensive as it was. And so the areas that you're talking about and that we discussed in particular, I can picture it on the map in my mind's eye. Those are in areas that we've identified as fire high consequence areas, FHCA zones. Within our fire high consequence area zones, we have identified some much smaller areas that are public safety power shutoff zones, which is what you're hearing about in Southern California with PG&E, shutting off power just proactively. We think we've tuned our program a little bit more finely, if that's the right term, than California, so that we don't think we're going to have to we're not going to have to do a lot of proactive shutoffs. They wouldn't affect Salt Lake very much, if at all. Most of them are in the Park City area and a couple other small areas. But for fire high consequence areas, like the ones we're talking about, we have investment plans, and I'm not at liberty to share those now or what the exact details are or timelines, but we do have investment plans to harden those resources. And what we're talking about, is largely the two things I mentioned before. Aside from vegetation management to the nth degree, beyond what we've done in the past, there's, you replace lines. I mean, the lines that we have up now, it's just metal conduit, it's just metal conductor.
Right, and that's part of the concern. Is
Right, and we're, when we address those lines and the risk that they can present in fire high consequence areas, we do it by replacing them with conduit that has or conductor that has essentially a big black hose on it, and then we have, it's fascinating in the context of California and the billions upon billions of lawsuits and things that have come PG&E's way. There are national electricity, NESC, I don't know what the Safety Council or something, NESC approved. The NESC approved fuses for a transmission line where if there's a trip, it isolates the remainder of the line by having a fuse, go off. The way they operate, and these are federally approved devices, is by exploding, right? So that's how they isolate the line. And so there are fuses in place, and I don't know if they're there, but when they operate as they're designed to do and approved by the federal government, they produce sparks. And so that's not ideal when you've got Santa Ana winds or even Utah winds, So there are new fuses that we have investment plans to get them out there in the field, and we're putting those out in the fire high consequence areas. And so as there's a lot of liability around this. We need to have really good plans and timelines before we start sharing, because we don't want to build expectation that we're going to be out there in 2020 when really it's going to be 2022. But as I am able to share that information for the areas around the avenues and other areas that are sensitive to Salt Lake, I'll share that with you.
So the only thing right now I can tell my residents is that either they have to pay to bury the power lines themselves, or you have to wait for an indeterminate amount of time until Jeff gets back to me and tells me when the system upgrades are going to be, whether they're going to be in 2020 or 2022, but he can't tell me right now.
Yeah, that's the best I can do right now. Although you could also tell them that, we've done a lot of clearing just in the past year in that immediate area around the transmission lines that are right there. I don't know if they're the exact distribution line that's on those backyards that you're talking about, but they have since we started getting more and more serious about fire, they have gone through that area and done intensive vegetation management.
Okay,
but I can't tell them when we're going to address the lines in that area yet, but hopefully in the next couple of months I will be able to.
Okay, so and when you say that you're taking fire more seriously, you're doing what besides clearing vegetation?
So, well, right now, and we've already started investing. In certain areas, we probably are starting with the power safety shutoff areas.
Okay.
We're also installing all kinds of monitors that hadn't existed in the past. Temperature, soil moisture monitors, lots of different, essentially weather station type things, but also that assess what's going on in the ground. And so we're doing that kind of stuff so that the system that raises the flag when we should proactively shut off, that we're able to better know, that we feed that data into the system. So we're investing in our monitoring and, data collection systems along the Wasatch Front, and we've also started investing in the actual physical infrastructure. This is on our distribution system, not on the transmission system so much. And so that's what I can tell you.
Okay, so I think the transition lines are probably what are most concerning because they're closest to the houses.
I think that the lines that are closest to the houses are distribution lines. The
Are they?
transmission lines are, so there are the houses there. There's the access to the Bonneville where we take our dog. there's the little bike park thing there, you know, the one where the kids jump and
The J Street.
and it's, the
jump,
transmission is sort of behind that. The distribution that I assume that these customers are staring at every day, it goes across the LDS Church parking lot, and it goes right along the back of their property line.
Right.
And so most of these plans are addressing distribution lines because those are the ones that need more attention. With transmission lines, there's less that you can do. You can't bury them. You can't.
Right.
I don't think that at that voltage you can do this type of new conductor, but I could confirm that. But so most of the plans I'm describing are around distribution.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Johnston. Oh, Councilmember Fowler.
Everyone. Hi, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Hi, good to see you.
I don't think we need to talk about this now, but I would like to set up a small group meeting. I'm interested in learning more about the load control. When you gave the example of, kind of flipping off the air conditioner or whatever, of course, for me, the first thought that came to my head was the equity behind flipping that off for everyone and what the policy sort of is. But this can be a conversation we can have offline. I know we're kind of butting up against our time with you.
If I could answer briefly, it's an opt-in program.
Okay.
And so you have to say, I want to do this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then we pay you. There's a credit on your bill for having that capacity available to us. And we utilize that program in a way that's really designed so that customers won't notice. So we cycle it. So if we want to shave load by 150 megawatts and we have, we would get there by cycling on like a 15-minute cycle, 600 megawatts of capacity.
Got it.
Or of load, rather, so that, these peak events don't last for 2 hours, so you'd only get hit once for 15 minutes. Your air conditioner would cycle down and then it'd cycle up and you probably would never even notice. And you'd have opted in and you'd be getting a credit on your bill every month. So I don't think that equity issue exists. People might get annoyed with it, and if so, they can opt out. But
Well, then perfect. I don't have any further questions.
Okay.
Nice work.
Okay. Okay. Councilmember Johnston.
Sure. I know time is of the essence here. Question about electric vehicle infrastructure. You said it's in your best interests, just as a company, to have a stake in that. Do you have specific plans to partner with the city about infrastructure, charging stations?
yeah, so back when I was at the state, in the state's energy office, I helped put together a DOE grant in partnership with Rocky Mountain Power and with the city and with Idaho National Labs and what's that one? The National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado and a bunch of other parties, including USU and the U. A big grant for essentially, electric mobility in Utah. And Salt Lake City is still partnering closely on that. We've done a lot of interesting sort of one-off projects because we were able to kind of tweak the program as we go, but it's millions of dollars, and we've combined it with our STEP program, Sustainable Transportation and Energy Plan, that passed through the legislature a few years ago. And we've invested a lot in infrastructure. We've invested a lot in ways to, through that infrastructure, monitor how EVs are being used, where and when, and by whom, so that we get a better sense of what we can do to better facilitate adoption. But yeah, we've invested a ton. I mean, many millions of dollars, and we've given away a lot of level 2 chargers to businesses, so about 1,000. Because our focus with level 2 chargers, which take 3 to 4 hours to charge a vehicle, that's sort of a business, an at-work charging application. And then we've partnered with Maverick and others to install level 3 fast chargers along the interstates to facilitate long distance travel. And so we're doing a lot with them. If you were to call someone down from the 4th floor in the sustainability department who's been engaged on this front in terms of what the city is doing on this, They could probably give you more details. I'm happy to follow up with an email or something to better describe what we've done in partnership with the city, particularly on EV. But one thing that we're doing on EV that I think is exciting is we're at the intermodal hub. We're installing a ton of chargers for the 25 or so new EV buses that you have. And we're figuring out a way so that we essentially automatically have it so that no tracks or front runner charging event at that location is happening because they pass by and there's a load spike. And we've essentially automated it so that those load spikes don't occur at the same time as buses are being charged, because that could push your peak for the month really high, unnecessarily high. So we have it automatically coordinating transit load, different types of transit load, so that we maintain a kind of a flat load profile, which reduces your energy costs and it reduces our need to deploy fossil fuel resources. So like, we're doing cool stuff on EV charging, and that's just the the stuff that I know, and that's not my area. I'm sure we could talk more about what we're doing, but we're really excited about it. It's cool, and it's 50+% of the emissions in this valley on an inversion day, well, on every day, but we care about them on the inversion days, are from vehicles. And so Tier 3 is really important, and I'm glad the governor's pushing Tier 3. He's out there, charging every vehicle he can get at Tier 3 stations. So Tier 3 is important, but EVs are critical, and so we're trying to just get the infrastructure out there. Anyone else?
All right, thank you. I think that's all the questions, and so thank you so much for coming, Jeff. I appreciate the clarification on that issue, and I'm sure we'll be chatting more about it.
I really hope so.
Okay.
It's becoming my favorite topic.
Okay, great. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so council members, we're about 10 minutes late for our dinner break, and we're also supposed to be hearing the business licensing presentation. So okay, are we okay with forging through business licensing real quick? And then I would like to have our closed session during the dinner break, if everyone's okay with that. Okay, so business licensing. Allison Rowland from council staff, Mary Beth Thompson, the financial officer, Lisa McCarver, director of revenue collections, and Andrew Willardson, software engineer. Come on down.
So Andrew couldn't make it tonight, so Long is going to do the demo for us.
Okay,
Actually,
great.
he's just going to run the machine, and Lisa will walk you through the demo.
Okay,
Okay, that's what she meant. I'm gonna rock it.
perfect. Has everybody had the small group presentation on this? No? No. No? Okay. I have. Okay.
I think that just you, Councilmember Wharton, and Councilwoman Johnston
Okay.
had it, so.
Well, while he's getting set up on this, I wanted to thank you guys for giving us a minute to bring you up to speed on what we're doing in business licensing. We've had a goal for a while to create a more efficient system for processing business licensing. We've been using Acela, which hasn't really been the best fit for licensing, in part because we have a complex fee structure, but also because our renewal process is also complex. So one of the things that we did, we looked at about half a dozen different software packages that were off the shelf. We went to about 4 cities and actually looked at their business license system to see how they did it. And we just weren't ever able to find something that really worked for the city, so we decided to build it ourselves. It is built on the Salesforce platform, so hopefully will allow for some integration between that and right now the CRM, but also other systems going forward in the city. The CRM is the constituent relations management. It's the complaint system that the council has supported for many years and is about to be launched. So,
And is it based on Salesforce too?
It is.
Okay.
Also, economic development uses Salesforce as well. So when business licensing comes on board, they will also be able to access business licensing's information So it will help economic development going forward as well.
Okay. So if you want to take us through the demonstration kind of as quick as we can, because I
Okay.
want to leave time for questions.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So this is the city's webpage. This is the business license area. So we've kind of redone this. It matches really well with the rest of the city's website. So this is the page they'll go to when they first come in. Has some instructions, things like that. Then they'll be asked to log into a portal, and this takes them into the Salesforce community. So we ask them, everyone will have to initially create an account. The process for that is very simple. We tried to ask for very little information. They can also use Google, Facebook to log into that. Once they actually set up that account and they're inside the portal, this is what they will be presented with. So they actually have this landing page that they come to, and it allows them to look at all of the licenses for all of their businesses. So it combines them all on one page for them. Also, this is where their applications are processed. They can see the status of those things here. On this page also, we've given them an option to check their zoning for the type of business they're interested in starting. This uses the open counter, which already exists, and it just takes them to that area so they can check their zoning and make sure that what they're wanting to do is allowed. Also on this page, they can ask questions, request information. There'll be a chat feature that's active here if people are actually online during working hours. They can also renew an existing license when that time comes. So to walk you through a quick application, if they'll click on the, process a new license. It runs them through their instructions. There's some pieces of information that are required for them to move forward, and we wanted to make it really clear here on this page what they need. And we've also provided links to all of those places so they can go immediately from here to the other areas if they need to. So it runs them through exactly the fields that are on our application now. We need an address. It's going to verify that, make sure it is in the city and that it's a valid address. A place here for them to put any other addresses. If they have a mailing address that's different, they can enter that there. This will ask them for their business classification, if they're commercial, home occ, or, and then it asks them for their NICS code. Then what happens from here is that, the next page is the contacts, right? Business information. Sorry, go ahead with that. So just quick entry of their business information, their name, when they plan on opening, how many employees they have as part of our fee structure as well. And as you can see down the side, it's walking them through this process so they can see where they're at and how far they have to go. This allows for them to enter the contact information for the business, so any principals or contacts that they would like to have on the license. Then based on the NICS code and the classification that they chose, it will walk them through a series of questions that are related to our fee schedule. So, it asks them the questions that are related to that type of business, and if we have a fee that's associated, these questions will either add that fee to their schedule or not. The last sheet here is required documents. So there are required documents for certain business types, but also for all business types. We ask for an ID, their Department of Commerce registration, things like that. So they'll be allowed to upload those here. Then it will bring them to this page where it will show them all of the fees that are required for that license. At this point, the fees are an estimate. We do review all of the license, all of the information they provided to make sure everything is correct and works out. We do tell them it's an estimate at this point. They agree and sign. This puts it in our queue to review in business licensing, and once that's all done, they'll receive another email that says, your application's approved at this point, you can pay your fees. That does trigger, once they pay the fees, it does trigger inspections that they need to go through, you know, health department, fire, whatever is related to their license. Those would go into a queue, actually in Acela. So on the inspector side, none of that will change. So once inspections are approved and everything's done, they'll be alerted. They can go back on the portal and print their business license. So they'll actually be able to bring up their license and print that. Uh-huh. Our intent is not to send an official one. We like this as an official one, and hopefully this is a way to start, you know, saving paper and doing things a little bit more efficiently.
And then as they renew, then emails will go out and say it's time for you to renew 60 days prior to, so we won't be sending renewal notices. They'll be going through an email instead of going through a paper process.
So one of the big goals we had with this system was the ability to assign these licenses to a specific officer. We reorganized business licensing to create officers that actually are assigned council districts. So when a new application comes in, based on its council district, it's assigned to a specific person who walks that application through the process and then is there as a liaison and a contact for that business owner through the life of their business. And we'll make sure that you guys know who your assigned person is, so that if you get questions, you can direct the people right to that person. They'll be familiar with the business, the area. So we're really hoping that between that and, you know, having this online platform, that it's really going to serve the business owners well. Part of the process that we went through, initially we demoed this to the Business Advisory Board and got their input when it was in its infancy, so that we could make sure we were capturing, you know, the things they were interested in. We got volunteers from that board to actually come and assist us in work sessions and help us build this out further. We've demoed it and exposed it to a lot of people that we hope will give us the right feedback that we need and have everyone's buy-in going forward. Everything's been really well received so far.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
Yeah, so, with the boom that we're having with co-working spaces, a lot of businesses are working out of the one address. So any co-working space may have, 100 businesses. And so what I've noticed is that so somebody will come over and get a business license, and then it would trigger inspections to the same building every single time, even though it's the same building. Nothing has changed other than there's one new business license in that address. So have you guys thought about how you're going to mitigate that? Since it's the same building, it's just a new business license for that address.
Yeah, and I mean, this system doesn't address that because the inspections are actually done in a different area. I mean, that's certainly a question that we can pose to them and see if we can coordinate that a little better.
We have had discussions for a while with the group that does the inspections on maybe looking at maybe doing self-inspections for certain types of businesses, law firms, those types of businesses that don't necessarily need a full building inspection, but could do a self-inspection and self-inspection list. I know Orion has completed that self-inspection list. It's been difficult with Acela. I believe that would be the next step in this process, is start to go forward with that.
But you know what I'm talking about,
Yep,
right?
absolutely.
Co-working spaces. I mean, there's plenty out there. And so it's just the same building. You just have an address in that. Yeah, okay, all right.
Councilmember Fowler.
Cool.
Thanks. Yeah, this is sort of on that same, in that same vein. A lot of complaints I've heard from business owners, whether it be a very small business owner to a very large multi-million-dollar business owner, is how difficult it is to get through the planning and inspection, mostly the inspection part of getting the license and getting through so that they can be up and running, and the amount of money that it's costing people, especially for people who are actually building a new building and have to go through these inspections and get their license. And so I know this may be a little bit outside of your purview, obviously, but I was curious, I think, more in, so I think we need to really explore the inspections and the permitting and that kind of stuff. But with the business license, you mentioned that in one of the one of the steps, it will kind of trigger a queue for the inspections.
Correct.
And who does that trigger it for? Does it trigger it for the fire marshal that's doing the inspection?
Correct.
So that goes into a queue, and then they're sort of like, hey, you have this new thing that you got to get
Correct.
done. And is this new to the system in general, or is this always how it kind of works?
This is always how it's been, and we worked really hard to integrate with the way it's done now so that we didn't disrupt their workflow. So everything on the inspection side will still continue the way it has.
The advantages for the businesses, though, that they don't have currently, is that it will show this, if it's completed, it shows you a highlight versus a non-highlight, so you'll know whether the inspection has been completed. Also, which we don't have up there yet, but we'll have the little eyes that will be able to give them the phone number so they can directly know exactly who to call and how to get a hold of an individual for an inspection, which right now they'd have to call business licensing, we'd have to give them a phone number. So we're trying to make it as user-friendly without them having to jump through all of those hoops.
Okay. Mr. Chair, may I request that we, in a future agenda, sort of really start to dive into the process by which our businesses are going from start to operational.
Sure.
I really have had a lot of constituents and in various phases of their development, and again, from your mom and pop to multi-million dollars, are having these similar issues. And I'd really like for us to dig in and see what we can do to help fix that. And I think it may be a budgeting, in part a budgeting issue. It may be a policy issue. It may be a little bit of both. But I would ask, Mr. Chair, that we put this on a future agenda item or a future agenda and really kind of start that conversation that so badly needs to happen.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councilmember Johnson, question?
Sure. So when a person starts this process, they start on the city landing page, webpage, and then it takes them to the Salesforce
Correct.
webpage. For folks who aren't used to going to a third-party vendor, are there assurances about privacy protections, those kind of things? Sometimes when you move from a page to a different off-site page, you get a warning. Is that going to happen here? How does that sort of work?
I mean, it's a different program, but it's still all a city software program. It's still all on our networks.
Yeah.
So I hope, I have Aaron here. I think he could speak more to that than I could, but.
That's an important piece to understand. It's still on our network. Our protections are in place for these. All right.
So actually, our city, the website doesn't reside on our network. It's at Utah Interactive, and then this data also resides in the Salesforce cloud, where all of our data resides. So if you'd like us to put a pop-up in saying that. Now, that being said, the data that sits in Salesforce can be completely encrypted and secure, and we own that capability of doing that.
I mean, this isn't the first time we've used a third-party vendor. We do this
Use it all the
across,
time,
exactly.
yes.
So it's not new to us. But just for folks who are asking those questions, are there ways we can give them the information kind of easily?
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure. Aaron Bentley, the Chief Technology Officer.
So what are the problems that y'all are experiencing on the back end with the current system that we're using? What's prompting this change?
Well, Acela has never really worked that well for business licensing. It's more of a permitting system.
Mm-hmm.
I think the biggest challenge that we've had is our renewal process. Business owners really seem to be attached to that license number that they have, and so when they renew, they would like to have that same license number. And so that has been a challenge, is to renew that and offer them the exact same license. A lot of cities that we looked at, they make business owners reapply every single year. It's a brand new process. And so they get a new license number, a new license, all of that. So we were trying to kind of be sensitive about that That's been probably the biggest hurdle we've had. I mean, our fee structure is complex, but I mean, other cities have even more complex systems and, you know, have been dealing with that. And that part wasn't our challenge for sure in this brief. But the biggest thing we wanted to do was offer this online interface. And this is something we just did not see anywhere. Nobody offers this step-by-step, you know, walk-it-through process that we've been able to develop here for people, so.
And Acela wouldn't allow this.
No, so we wanted, our vision has always been you can walk through a business license in your pajamas, in your bed. You don't have to come down to Salt Lake City and fill out an application and walk through the process. And this accomplishes that task for the customers.
So I'm asking what the problems are on the back end because, you know, I've had my own business since 2012, and I've always thought that the process was overly complicated and was really not happy with the way that it works at all. And so I like the idea of being able to have, being able to do this, you know, from anywhere, have my assistant be able to handle this. And so for me, like this, you know, is night and day difference in terms of an experience that I would rather have as a business owner in the city. So, so if you're telling me that we can't offer this with the current system, that's a big problem. So I love the ease of access, and I would want to definitely. I mean, you have 4 small business owners. Well, I guess is James a small business owner? He's a big business owner. He's a small to medium big business owner. He's a small businessman. That's right. Yeah, that's what you get. If you leave the council meetings, you will be ridiculed. So I think for us, you know, something like this makes a big difference. So I'm really excited about it. Councilmember Valdemorse.
Does this work on an iPhone? I mean, do you have to get an app, or is this just like a web-based type of
No,
thing? That you can get on your
it does.
phone?
In fact, I think Long could show you. It does change its orientation for
Okay.
whatever device you're using.
Okay, that's awesome. And then as he looks for that, so I want to go back to the inspection portion of this, because from what I hear, and correct me if I'm wrong, you were kind of solving this issue, and it's a great solution for getting these licenses out. But then that's where your work stops, because then the inspections kick in, right? So who do we talk to make these inspections be more efficient than they have been in the past? Because we're moving towards efficiency. I mean, this is great. This is saving time, lots of good stuff, which is awesome. So I agree with all of you. But now we're trying to solve problems. Let's get it all now as we're going through this and ready to launch this. The next step is the the inspection portion. Are you the guys who talk to, or
So I think that, you know, there are several areas, you know, depending on what type of business you have may have a health inspection, police inspection, fire inspection, or a building inspection. The easiest to do self-inspections with would be fire and building, and Orion has talked about this for several years. I think that would be the next step, right? Be able to put a form on here. If it is a law firm, for example, you know, go in the form, they check off the form and self-sign their self-inspection. And that would be the next step that we work towards in putting that on Salesforce.
But before we launch it, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, let's not launch it as is, and then we have to keep adding or changing things, right? Could
Well, I
that
think that
happen?
we're going to have to add and change. You know, the landlord-tenant program isn't on this at this point. That's a phase 2 as well. Going forward, landlord-tenant is a very complicated system that we also want to do the exact same thing, right? Form comes up, they look at the management agreement, sign the management agreement online so that we're not having to go paper, right? The landlord-tenant is very paper-intensive. We don't want paper intensity, so.
But how do we make this happen?
Okay, I think that the briefing that Councilmember Fowler asked for and will be a very good first step. You have an audit that was done that's something that can be built upon. So first, and I know that the administration is working on this. The people who work in the departments are also working on it. So I think probably in the next year, this will be a major topic for all of the city, the administration, the departments, the council. And I just wanted to say one quick thing about, we've mentioned Acela, and lest anyone get the impression that it's not a good program. It is. It's something that the council invested in several years ago, and it's just a different tool in the toolbox. So there's, this tool that happens to be the same as the constituent program and the economic development program, and then there's Acela that could probably be adapted in some ways, but these guys in assessing it found that this was more fitting. And then there's the city's regular GIS program that is quite robust. So they're all tools in the toolbox, none of them bad, as far as I know.
That's correct.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
do you want me to motion to go into closed session?
Yes, I do. I very much do.
I'm going to move, Mr. Chair, I move that we go into closed session for purposes of, hold please, pending litigation, strategy sessions to discuss pending litigation and other attorney-client matters. Or no, just pending litigation. Oh,
Okay.
advice of counsel as well. Thank you.
Okay, and I will roll call this. Councilmember Fowler?
Yes.
I'm a yes. Councilmember Johnston?
Yes.
Councilmember Valdemoros? Yes. Councilmember Dugan? Yes. All right, we will go into executive session. Anybody, as you said earlier, who doesn't know what we're going into executive session is about probably needs to leave the room. So. on items 7, 8, 9, and 10 can go. So we're going to go to funding our future update for revenue. Is that? Okay, so can I get Ben Ledke at the table, Mary Beth Thompson, Lisa McCarver, and I'm gonna just, can you give your presentation in 10 minutes?
About 2.
Sold.
Can I
Sold.
get 2? Good.
Yes.
2 minutes is great.
Great.
I can try 1, but I don't know that I can get there in that time. But I can do it in 2.
All right, nice. Well, I'm.
So in the transmittal, the projected revenue of $28,149,980, which is $3.1 million above budget, is the actual at this point. So that amount of money is the amount of money that, in your legislative intent, you said you wanted to go to streets. So a portion of that may come back in a budget amendment from the administration, but the remainder of it would be nice for us, the administration, to know the direction you'd like to go on that $3.1 million. But that is the actual that has dropped to fund balance that has to be reappropriated if you choose to do so, or if the administration chooses to do so.
Does that conclude your presentation?
It does.
Thank you. Council members, questions, quickly.
This is a quick question for streets. Can that be used as quickly as it's available, essentially?
So I think a portion of it may come back in a budget amendment number 4 from Public Services. So that would be, a portion of it will be used from fund balance for FY19, from streets crew, yes.
Okay.
I don't know on actual construction of streets. I don't know that they can use that plus the $20 million in bonding money
That's what I
that they
was
have
wondering.
available
Is
right
it going to sit there and not be used this year because we just can't get to it based on the amount of funding we already allocated?
Yes, I think that there is some that can be used now, but I don't know that all of it could be used now. We can go back and reevaluate the total, but a portion of it.
It doesn't change my decision necessarily to keep it in the streets, but I think it's something to pay attention to.
Okay.
If there's something else that we need to do now versus that could be used now, I don't know. Thought.
Other questions, council members?
Question, so, sorry, I didn't hear what the extra was. So we projected $28 million roughly, and the actuals were?
Budget was 25. We
Or
projected
25, okay,
28,
annual.
so the 3.1 million dropped to fund balance in
Okay.
revenues. That the council's legislative intent was for streets for FY19.
Okay.
You can obviously change that. It's a legislative intent. As well as Ben and I discussed prior to that, when we upped the fund balance from 10 to 13, we did not include FOF into that 13%. That's about $1 million. So that may be another consideration that you want to consider as well, is to make sure that we have that 13% in FOF fund balance as well as general fund balance. I thought you'd like that.
Oh, really want it. Which is good. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, council members? Great, thanks so much. Okay, item number 8, funding our future updates, streets reconstruction bond capital improvements program. If we could get Ben Ludke, Mary Beth, sorry, you're back here, and Matt Cassell. Sorry, Mary Beth. You're done after this. Okay. Can you do this in 10 minutes?
I can do it in 2 minutes.
Wow. Okay. I am loving this.
I don't think so.
Well, we'll just have to see about that.
Okay.
And go.
Matthew Castle, city engineer. Thank you for having me up here today to talk about the bond projects that are up and coming. We're excited that we've received the bond funds for the first draw, $20 million. We have started those projects in design. We have actually put 2 of them out to bid, the 2 local street projects. 3 that are going to be put out to bid this month in the month of January are going to be our 5th South, 2nd East, and 7th West projects. And we are actually starting design for our 2021 projects. Cool. That's what I have. We haven't spent a single dime yet of the money. 5th South, 2000 East, and 7th West, yes. 7th West.
Wait, we haven't spent a dime of the bonding money?
We just received it.
Oh, okay.
We've been using Class C funds to get through the design portion of it.
Okay.
We are ready to spend.
And do we have the Second Streets team? Oh, wait, we can't use the bonding for that. Never mind. Okay, cool. Question, Councilmember Johnston, if it's
So-
about fund balance.
No.
Okay.
I
thank you.
assume we'll just do that. This year, council districts 1 and 7 for local streets.
Yes.
2021 is what council districts do you recall?
I don't think I have it in here. I can get back to you on that one.
Because we did them 2, 2, and 2.
We did, yes.
And then 1 at the very end.
Yes.
Might be
There's
6
a
at
little
the
bit of
very end.
mixture in there, but yes, 2, 2, 2, and 1.
Okay, so this is an important piece just for the public to have the right expectations. So look forward, if you're in different council districts, that it will come in a year to come, but
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Other questions, council members? Great. Thanks so much. I think he beat you.
I think he did too.
Well, next time try for a minute 30.
I will try better. I will do better.
Okay, sweet. We will move on to item number 9, funding our future quarterly update, transit. At the table, we have Liz Bueller and, John Larson and Julianne Cebula. Yeah, right? Can you guys do it in a minute 30?
Yes.
I'm just asking.
Messing around. Sure, yeah.
All right, take the full 2. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Okay, excited here. I just want to be here. I just want to plug the dashboard. So if you take one thing away, you and the vast listening audience, check out the dashboard. There's a link to it off the Funding Our Future website. It's updated monthly as ridership numbers come in. And the good news is we've put out better service and people are using it. So, and those numbers you can see on the screen there. So that's the weekday ridership. The Route 9 got the biggest improvement in the weekday ridership, going from 30 to 15 minutes and better geographic coverage. And so we saw a really healthy jump on that. It basically doubled compared to the previous years, comparing the same month year over year. And then also saw a big jump in weekend service on all of the routes. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Julianne.
So I could read to you directly from the dashboard and what is written up there, but I won't. I'll spare you that. But I want to hit a couple of the highlights because I think that they're pretty exciting. So the ridership, John mentioned, we have the improved routes 2, 9, and 21. All east-west connections, all entirely within Salt Lake City, and people love it. And what I'd like to do is just tie that to something that, we did a soft launch. It reached a lot of people, about 1.3 million. What is the impressions? I'm not an outreach person, so I'm going from what the consultant told me. But in terms of unique impressions, people that clicked on our videos or heard the Spotify ads and responded in some way, it was over 444,000 people. So we really reached a lot of people, even with a soft launch of those routes. And now we're out talking to community groups, community councils, people at senior centers and so forth, to provide information about the new routes, answer questions, and start to develop some of the branding for that system, and they love it. And the stories that they're coming back and telling us are so encouraging. It's exactly what I think everyone hoped to see with improved transit service, which is I can take my baby to daycare and get to work without it taking 2 hours. Those types of stories are great to hear. I can go to work and then I can go to different meetings during the day because I know the service is frequent all day long. I can do things on weekends. I'm a service industry worker and I know I'm not going to get stranded at 9 o'clock. Those types of things, that's exactly what we wanted to hear, and it's happening. So it's making us very happy. And we have a couple of things that are in the works, but in terms of the quarterly update, those are I think the big takeaways, the big highlights. We've also worked well with the big employment areas. We're working in partnership with UDOT and their TravelWise program for Research Park, for the West Side industrial areas, and so far so good on that. As well as trips to transit, we had to do a little bit of a reboot on that. We had trouble getting to where we felt like we needed to be for our residents to serve them well, and to conduct a good pilot and to feel comfortable with legal terms. And so we did a little bit of a reboot, and we have a good path forward for trips to transit, but it's taking us a little longer. So we'll have more to say, I think, next update about that.
Great. Council members, questions?
May I?
Member Johnston?
Thank you.
Fund balance?
No.
Okay.
Capital enhancements?
Yes.
So great work on this, and the dashboard is helpful. I'm assuming the goal isn't that every stop will have a shelter and bench necessarily. It may be tailored to the need of the stop and those sort of things. Do you have a sense of, on the dashboard, what the goals would be?
In terms of number of improved stops or what level?
Yeah, so we put the dashboard to tell the public how we're doing.
Right.
We don't really have any sort of benchmarks, and this is our goal here. Is that the goal on this particular one, or?
I can talk about how I've been approaching it. It's not a formalized goal. What we are tackling first are the stops that we absolutely need to upgrade to meet ADA, especially where there's new service and it's a stop that isn't already grandfathered in. It doesn't exist yet. So those are really important to tackle first. And the ADA access is absolutely our top priority. And then preparing for the next route. So 6th and 10th North, for example, are kind of next on that list. And I don't know, John, if you have anything you'd like to say about that, but the capital improvements will be a really important piece of that because it just is, it means so much in terms of being visible in the neighborhood and people recognizing that it's going to be a first-class travel experience, not a second-class one, if you're taking transit. So that's a high priority for us.
Yeah, and so for 6th and 10th North, since that's brand new service, we've got to lay the groundwork. We're working with UTA and their service planners to figure out the routing for those two routes. We're still shooting with a goal of August 2021, which is going to be on us really soon. And so we are actually just about to kick off with a consultant for the 6th North analysis. 10th North we're going to be able to keep in-house. So that's looking at where to put the bus stops, and then also putting in bicycle and pedestrian enhancements on and along and near those corridors to make it safe and convenient to get to and from each of those bus stops and to be able to cross the street to and from the bus stops. And then we're also looking at the other corridors in the city. And so it's really kind of a case-by-case basis of each stop, but the busy stops are going to have more amenities, right? At a minimum, they have to be ADA compliant. But the goal would be to have every stop along the frequent transit network route have the appropriate level of investment. And so we have those two routes. We've been working on the 9, and then the 21. We're doing just an in-house analysis of 21st South and 21st East to make sure that we're getting the appropriate level of investment on that. And then we're also kicking off a study on 2nd South, which is on the street reconstruction project, or the street bonds list. So that's going to get a huge upgrade, including a bus hub, kind of in the east downtown area. We don't know exactly where yet.
Is the city maintaining those stops as far as cleaning all those
No, so if, it depends, I guess, is a better answer to that. So we have the bus stop and bike share design guidelines that council adopted a few years ago. There was an ordinance change needed for concrete in the park strip and such. And once we had that in place, we were able to go in and just improve stops. UTA will maintain those stops as long as it's at the level of amenitization that their own bus stop master plan calls for. Standard amenities. If we do custom amenities, artwork, some other things, and we've done this at 500 East and 900 South. You may have seen that there's a little bit of artwork there. That's something that we will either remove or maintain when the time comes. We knew the 9 line was happening, and we'd have an opportunity to go in there and do some stuff anyhow.
So with basic cleaning, they don't call the city for, I'll say the 9 South and Trax bus stop. For the bench, the windows, the floor, you call UTA. How does that happen?
So they power wash monthly.
Okay.
And if, for example, you get kids with BB guns that'll shoot out a panel of a shelter, for example, they'll go out and replace that. They empty the garbage on an as-needed basis, and the operators report back on when the garbage is full and that's needed. So those types of things are handled by UTA.
So even graffiti UTA handles?
Yeah.
Okay, is there a call number for UTA for, say, graffiti? It's more real-time than monthly, or any sense of that?
I think that their general customer service number is something you can do. There's also a pretty active PR and marketing group on Twitter.
Yeah.
And so if you're on Twitter, that's probably an easy, quick way to get a response in the queue from them. So they'll respond to anything on an as needed, but in terms of the regular scheduled.
We may need to figure out how to make that more seamless for city residents. Because everyone's, for graffiti, people are used to calling the city graffiti line, but it may not help this situation. Okay.
Right, yep. The other thing I should mention about we're probably way over our 2 minutes at this point.
Okay.
So stop me if you need to, but I wanted to just mention with the bus stops that ridership has grown faster than we expected. And often it'll take a year or two before you see travel behavior change in response to changes in the system, and it's just happening right away. And so we are future-proofing some of these stops and pouring them at a size that's an amenitization level or is prepared for that, for shelters, for instance, where ridership today might not warrant it, but if it does in a month, we don't want to have poured concrete and not have space to put a shelter. So we're going forward in that manner. Stop us now if that's not something you like.
Well, or we're also adding enough space where appropriate to make a mini intermodal hub. So on the 9th South 50 stop, we actually poured enough concrete for a green bike to put a station there, and maybe even like a scooter corral or something.
No, really impressive growth in their ridership.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
Nice job.
Thank you.
Any other questions, council members? Oh, yeah, actually, I have one too. Go, Councilmember Dugan.
And we brought this up the other night at the council meeting, but extending them to, the zoo and the Natural History Museum, is that part of this, or is that completely different scope?
That will be a new conversation, but I did mention our program in terms that we're doing with Research Park. That's something we can expand to areas that include the Foothill Cultural District, for instance, where you're talking about.
I mean, if you could do any testing, it'd be great to do that in the summertime.
Okay.
Because a lot of people go there every day.
That's great feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration as we're developing those plans.
Thanks.
Just a quick question on the graffiti removal. Can you answer that, Lisa? Do you know if they call the city's graffiti removal number, did we send that to UTA, or do we send somebody from the city out? Traditionally partner with UTA. Okay.
So is that, I don't want to make policy right now, but it sounds like we should. Is that the message to the community to call the graffiti line anyway, and then just you'll transfer it forward to UTA? I don't want to put you on the spot to sort of say that's.
Yeah, I am a little bit on the spot here. I think that people have been in the habit of using either the app or calling the graffiti hotline. And in those cases, we will definitely transfer it to where it needs to go. But I don't think it's a bad idea to start directing people to the proper channel. It's just one more level, right, if they call us. But, you know, the graffiti team is one of those examples of an incredibly successful program because it's properly funded and they have a very narrow mandate and they know exactly what they need to do. And so they're efficient. And so people get used to that, and we will direct those calls for service to the proper person unless it needs to be abated right away.
Thank you. Okay, any other questions, council members? Okay, great, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Okay, funding our future quarterly updates, street conditions. At the table, we have Ben Lutke and Lorna Voigt. Vote. What? Vote? Oh, okay.
Please do.
Yes.
Vote for. Thank you very much. We did put together just a really quick slideshow just to refresh your memories on how the street surface treatment program works. Just some quick facts. I like this one, the second one in there. We've touched 7,200 households this last season. And as you remember, this started out in 2019, and we have a very short season from May to September. And the teams got out there and they were able to pretty much meet their target. And another slide will show you why they were not able to meet their target. So, want to do the next one? Who's doing it? Mine? I got it? Okay, this one shows you typically what our surface treatments are divided into. This is really dependent on a lot of different factors, including what public utilities is doing, what engineering is doing, and what transportation is doing. And one thing we're doing is working with our partners in transportation engineering is to make sure that we're getting the right kinds of streets done even for their streets design. They're putting a road on a road diet. We'll try to take that into consideration. So there's a lot of different factors that go into which roads we pick for which kind of treatment. The final factor is the cost. The chip seal and the inlays are by far the most expensive ones we do. Then I wanted to give you a quick brief on what we do right now. So this is the things that are happening when it's not snowing outside and all our teams are out snow plowing, is they're out there preparing the roads. And so what they do is they prepare the roads a year in advance, so when they get out and do the treatments, they're properly sealed and ready to take the surface treatment. That makes them last significantly longer. And what we're doing right now is working with engineering to find out how much these small surface treatments will do to improve the OCI, which is our target right now, is the lane miles we produce, and then improving that OCI. And so the work that's going on right now with engineering is to tweak the data, fine-tune it, get out on the streets and test it, verify it, and see how much more we're getting with just these small improvements that we're making. This is a calendar just of 1 month. I just wanted to show you what are some of the factors that impact the lane miles. So if we have bad weather or if we have an equipment breakdown, we can lose 7 to 9 to 12 miles that day. So we're very sensitive on how many miles we can do. I wanted to show you what we did last year. And these are surface treatments that we completed, and then I'm going to show you what we're going to do this year, this coming season. This is important because we want to show not only the roads that we're surface treating alongside the roads that we're going to be reconstructing to show that we're covering the city as much as we possibly can. And again, this is all done in coordination with engineering and transportation so we can get the best coverage and make sure that most residents possible are seeing some improvements to their local streets. Remember, we're doing mostly residential streets, so we're going best first and attacking those streets so we can preserve their life and not have to go back and reconstruct them so soon. So that's all I have for you. If you have any other questions for us.
Yes. Councilmember Valdemoros, do you have a question?
You just said that you were attacking the, can you say that again? Which streets get, which residential streets get treated?
We do best first, meaning that we're trying to preserve the quality of the best streets.
Okay.
So we don't have to reconstruct them and to keep them longer life. We're looking for lifespan.
And part of the overall strategy is the bond funds for reconstruction are the worst first. So we're coming at it from both angles.
Mm-hmm. And we're primarily focused on those residential streets. So whereas reconstruction projects are going to be smaller sections, we would like to hit as many residential streets as we can.
Great. Council members, other questions? Great, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so now we will go back to item number 6, the Council District 5 vacancy process. Thank you, everyone, for staying late.
The memo.
Yeah, one of them, the color is like way off.
Is that just an adjustment thing, you think? The bottom right one?
Hi.
Hi, Lehua. So we have Lehua and Cindy Lou from the council office. So in your packets, I think, maybe, nope, never mind.
It should have been in your red folders. Well, we kind of passed it out right after your break, so we passed out a list of applicants in
Okay,
a flow
perfect.
chart.
Okay,
And we're actually going to start with the memo that should be in your red folders. It was also added to Dropbox and online today, and it has some sample questions.
yeah, that's the one I wanted.
So before the last time that we did this, we didn't have a last time to so easily refer to. But since the council went through this about a year ago, council staff just kind of resurrected what the process was from last year. And one of the things that the council did was the night that the application period closed, questions were submitted to each of the applicants to respond in writing to the council by that Friday afternoon. And so in following that process, we have for you on that memo, both the questions that were used last time and then a couple of other questions that the council may want to consider. So in reviewing the questions, it would be helpful if you want to decide how many if you want to submit questions to the applicants to respond to. If so, how many? And then just to confirm that we would request that the answers would be submitted back to our office by this Friday afternoon so that they can be included in your packets.
Okay.
And we're happy to change anything you want.
So I just wanted to say, I felt like last time questions, I don't know how everybody else felt, but I felt like questions 2 and 3 were getting like very similar responses.
Yeah,
So
Agreed.
I think we should get rid of question 3.
amen.
And I would love to get questions 8 and 9 back in there. So if there's
Yes.
another one that people thought was repetitive, like I mean, I didn't know that I ever found question 1 to be terribly helpful, even though I think I submitted it last time. But
Yeah, I think that question 7 and question 1 are like
yeah.
pretty similar.
Okay, yeah.
So either get rid of one or combine them or say something like, what do you think your role as a council member
Sure.
plays or something, but
Yeah.
combine those two.
Yeah, or just, yeah.
Well,
just take away.
they're gonna,
So
we'll have it
yeah,
redone.
we'll just take them out. Yeah, exactly.
I also think
What do you
that
think about the Ripper Clause?
question number 5
Yes.
seems silly to me because I think we got, like, everybody answered the same thing, which is exactly what our priorities are, which is homelessness.
Yeah.
Infrastructure, like general streets and infrastructure, affordable housing. And I don't know that there's any value to that question.
Okay, I agree.
And the amount of applicants we have, and last time there was a lot of writing,
There was a lot.
that I'd like to try to see if we can limit the questions so they present more value rather than more pages, more words I have to read.
Yep.
Gonna be real honest there. 'Cause I'm,
Kind of like 5.
you like 5?
Detailed one we really have.
But did it, Mike, I agree with you, but I would say, did it give you a lot of insight about the applicants?
No, but with 27 people, you're trying to sort out tiers to begin with.
Yeah,
So
that's
I'm trying
true.
to figure out
Yeah, but
how do we pull people apart early on? Because this is the first thing we see is.
I don't know, I had 23 applicants last time and it didn't do anything for me. You know what I mean? I'm fine leaving it in if we can think of another one to take out.
As long as we've got something detailed that helps sort of sort earlier on.
You mean 4 and 6? Or
4 and 6 definitely are.
yeah. What about yeah?
We could,
I would say let's get rid of 4
okay.
if it were
Okay.
okay. So 5. So what I've got
What
right
if we
now.
somehow combined 5 and 6, Andrew? Because I
Okay.
think those actually relate in the sense of what are your priorities? And with a limited budget, how
Yeah,
are
yeah.
you gonna do it? Like, what would you prioritize more, right? And it's actually a question that we kind of run up against in budget season.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So right now we've got we're at 7 questions.
I like 11 too.
What was that?
11 insert other items suggested. No,
No.
cutting 11. Do we think we need 10?
Yeah, because I think that is one where hopefully somebody gets creative, and then that was the first one I went to, because it was like the thing that, it's like, don't, all the rest of
So
it's
I would say, can we change it a little bit to like tell us something like, tell us like a unique hobby or interest you have or something like that, like the fun part of people's resume where it's like.
I feel like people should understand what that question means.
All right.
If you put something boring, then I know more about you.
Okay, so okay. So what I have,
Exactly.
based on our feedback so far, is I have question 2. So 7 questions total. Question 2, question 5, question 6, question 7, question 8, question 9, question 10.
Yes, but 5, can I read what 5 would read?
5
Yes.
and 6 would go together.
So with
yeah.
limited budget resources and unlimited wants, prioritize what you see as the top 3 infrastructure needs for Salt Lake City over the next 5 years and explain your
Oh, right.
choices.
Yes,
Okay.
and then we get rid of 6,
Yes,
right?
so then that's 6 questions. Perfect.
Done.
And then, sorry, I made an edit to another one. Would 7 be changed to read something more like, how do you believe you impact city neighborhoods in your role as a city council member?
I would say, what do you believe your role is as a city council member?
Well, I think if we're trying to get to separation of powers idea, or do you understand the city enough to?
But weren't we trying to, I thought when we asked that question, we were trying to get to more like, do you see yourself as a representative of your district and your neighborhoods? Or do you see yourself as like a decision maker for the whole city who's from that neighborhood?
Do you see yourself as a dictator? No?
Do you see yourself as a mini dictator?
Tiny dictator.
Tiny dictator.
Small business person.
I think it's okay to, I like it the way it is, or keeping it with the changes that you made.
Can I read it just
Can
to
you
be
read it
sure?
again, please?
What Councilmember Wharton said is, what do you believe your role is as a city council member?
But it says of the resident, okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm tracking it separately
Okay,
than Cindy
perfect.
Lou.
Okay, so if everyone's okay with this, can we get a straw poll to approve these?
7 questions?
I'd like a straw poll to approve these questions to,
I have,
Oh, because we took out number 1
right,
on the one up there.
so, sorry, because Cindy Lou and I are out of sync. I'm sorry that I did that. So number 1 up there would be removed.
Yes.
So the number 2 up there would be a question that we would keep. Number 3 up there is removed.
Number 1 would be that up there.
Sorry,
Is that
I
right?
think what you, yeah. Yes, those are the 6 questions. Thank you, sorry.
yes.
And what we'll do, sorry,
I'm just going to propose a straw poll, that these be the 6 questions that we submit to applicants to have them turn in by Friday
At 3 p.m.
at 3 p.m.
Okay. Mountain Standard Time.
And so what we'll do is sorry.
Oh, wait, hold on. It's a straw poll, so we don't need a second. And Lehu, what were you gonna say?
I was just going to clarify so everyone knows what we're going to do with them to get them out. But that, I shouldn't
Let's vote
interrupt
on
your
this
straw.
first.
Vote on the question.
Okay. Questions and due on Friday at 3.
Great.
Okay, that's unanimous.
Now,
Right,
Straw
so we
poll.
have an email prepared and the list of applicants, which we are actually up to 28 now. And we will send out the email this evening to all of the applicants with the information and the questions and the request to have them back by Friday at 3 p.m. This Friday at 3 p.m. And then once we receive all of those, they'll be submitted to the recorder's office, just like the applications were. And then they will coordinate with us to get us all of the paperwork, and then we will add that information online for both you and the general public to access in advance of Tuesday's present. I would say by the end of the workday Friday. Mm-hmm.
will you create a Dropbox folder for that? Is that what we did last year?
And we will also do the Dropbox folder for that. So the applications redacted as necessary and the answers to all of the questions will be placed online on the public website and then given to you as your normal packet material typically is.
Great.
So, but the general public will be able to see them too?
Yes,
Okay, and that was the case last time?
yes.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Mhm.
Just personal information is redacted.
Yeah,
out,
some
right?
of the personal information
Right,
is
yeah.
redacted as the applicant's request.
Great.
Mhm.
By Friday at 5 or
Five-ish.
6 or
Yeah,
7.
and that's the reason for requesting it by 3 p.m. so that staff has time to gather it and then get it placed before the end of the day.
Applicants, if you're listening, please be timely for our staff.
Yes, yeah. I think last time everybody but one was.
Call
Um,
that person out?
No.
Good, all right.
However, if that person is listening, just know that it made everyone sad.
Oh, shoot.
So
Shall we move to this?
let us move to, well, I wanted to just double check. I see Nicole Smedley's in the audience from the recorder's office. Do you have any questions or anything with anything we've gotten so far? Okay, great. Excellent. So this is what Councilmember Fowler and I have discussed. Do you mind if I talk about this? So the feedback that I heard most from the time that we did this last time was we said that we were going to likely hold 2 rounds of voting, but it may only be 1 round of voting, and that we would make that determination if there was a clear consensus. We didn't really define what clear consensus was, and so I think both a little bit council members were surprised, and a little bit, I should say, I don't think that this would have changed the outcome at all, but I think applicants came in with a certain expectation. I think even you were probably kind of surprised. So we wanted to define what will determine whether we go into a second round of voting, so people know going in, if this doesn't happen, there will be a second round of voting. If this does happen, it's over.
And just so council members know, we were talking about it and kind of brainstorming, just because we were in a room together mostly, and sort of modeled a little bit this after how the Democratic Convention works, just because it's a percentage more than anything, and so we kind of were this is what we've both been through and seen, and it kind of works, and so we asked staff to look at the numbers and kind of figure this out. So thanks for this flow chart so quickly, because we were only talking about this. Well, I mean, at this point, it's been 24 hours, or at least it feels that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Lehu, do you want to walk us through it?
Yes. And this blends what happened last time plus the conversation today. The first round would be the applicants providing 5-minute presentations. Right now we have that scheduled for next Tuesday, January 21st. Depending on the number of applicants that we just received, we'll probably be starting close to 3 o'clock, I would imagine, 2:30 or 3 o'clock. And if you calculate out 28 applicants and 5-minute presentations, it'll probably be about 3 hours worth of time. Yeah, and we give a little bit of time for people to come up and get situated and things, and I believe that we'll also have one applicant who will be calling in, and so that may take a few extra minutes as well. So, and then once all of those applicants' presentations are done, then the council would take a vote. The idea that we discussed, and of course these numbers can change, is that each council member would register 4 votes. So you could register for 4 people, or you could put, I suppose, all 4 of your votes on no.
We said no to that last time.
I'm sorry. Okay, so, yeah, so you would.
Right. Correct.
And then it divides from there. Staff will be tallying. You'll have ballots similar to like what you do for chair and vice chair elections. And so between staff and the recorder's office, we will tally how the votes are lodged. And then there would be kind of 2 options at that point, if I understand what you guys were saying correctly. Basically, we would see which of the applicants have 66% or more of the votes, because that would be 4 of the 6 of you registering a vote for that person. And if there are more than 3 applicants who received 66% of the vote, then those are the ones who would continue in the process. If there are fewer than 3 applicants who've received 66% of the votes, then all of the applicants who received a vote would move on to the next phase of the process.
I like that.
That sound? Okay. So then moving on to the next phase of the process means
Same night.
The council would take a second vote. And in that second round of voting, each council member would use 3 votes.
Okay.
And then theoretically, what that would mean is that at that point, any applicant who receives 4 or more votes would continue in the process.
Okay.
Does that sound right?
It might be thick here. If there are 3 people left in the process, the council has 3 votes?
Good question. So maybe we would reduce it, the number of votes each council member has, or?
Because then if they don't get to group them, everybody would vote for 3 people.
So I think, sorry.
And I think one of the other options is that at that point, if you had only 3 applicants, then perhaps that moves to the place where council members each only have 1 vote.
Yeah. Then
So that was a
That
place
might be.
I needed, to ask.
I think we could do that.
Yeah.
Okay. So we can
Like,
draw
if there's
that.
only 3 votes or 3 applicants that move on to the second round, then council members just have 1 vote.
Or to a vote where council members only have 1 vote.
Yeah. I mean, basically, so I guess what you could put in there is asterisk if 3 or fewer make it to this 3rd blue circle, then you just go straight to
Then we proceed to
That.
the end. Yeah. Proceed to
straight
the final vote.
to council 3rd vote each council member, but it wouldn't be the 3rd vote, it'd be the 2nd vote, but still 3 or fewer. P.S. by the way, I do not, in my personal opinion, I don't want to do 2nd round interviews, and I am hoping that this can finish on next Tuesday. But that's just my input. That's what I'm going to be, that's out there.
Yeah, I would also like that. So yeah, I think our one way, again, that we talked about our messaging last time was it could be 2 vote nights, but it could be 1. I think what we'll say this time is we're hoping to get this done in 1 night, but if it becomes necessary that we need a second that will be on the that will be February 3rd.
4th.
Whatever, February 4th, 3rd, 4th, just come down whenever. There was, what we wanted to do was kind of what Andrew was saying was in the first round of voting, sort of establish like a tier of people that we thought were like most qualified, and then select from that pool, as opposed to trying to, yeah. But yes, we did consider that.
I guess my question for other council members is, do you find value in a second interview or second tell us what you think?
Oh, yeah. Another 2-minute speech following the 5-minute speech, is that valuable? Okay.
Great. Andrew?
If we're down to 6 people and we have our votes split pretty evenly, we can keep just taking votes until we narrow each other down to sort of the last person standing. It doesn't necessarily help me understand who I would favor more.
Could we say that, just so the applicants know, could we say that interviews may be possible if the council deems it necessary, and then a council member could make a motion at that time to have a second interview, and if it gets voted on favorably, then we do second interviews?
Well, how about this?
Or second, they're not interviews, second, tell us why you think.
Yeah, if I can
Whatever.
offer a friendly amendment, if we do this all in one night, I think one 5-minute speech is adequate. If we have to go to a second day, then I think we give them 2 minutes to kind of like give a refresher, because some time will have passed. Sorry? 3 hours? No. If we schedule a second date, then they get the 2-minute speech. But if we do all the voting the first night, or if we determine that we can get it done all in one night, then no speech. But if we determine that we need a second night, then they get the 2-minute speech on the second night.
What if, because this is an emotion,
Okay.
just because I heard Andrew, like part of his concern is like, if it comes down to 4 or 5 people and I still, is as another speech, what if we have a surprise question for those, or for those last people when we're in the 3rd or 4th round of voting and they have 2 minutes to answer it? It would be like, sort of like a beauty pageant question. Like, how would you solve world peace? Or create peace between the city and the state legislature?
Yeah.
I'm sort of serious, though. I mean, not about the questions themselves that I'm saying, but.
We have them design a new city flag.
We'll provide construction paper. Okay.
Well, we don't allow dowels, so
Oh, that's right.
we wouldn't get the full effect of the flag. So
So I think, I think on this diagram, the first phase makes sense. The second vote makes some sense. My assumption is if it's pretty clear at that point, we're going to know it'll be done. If we're going to look at interviews, we probably need to structure them clearly and define them very well so we know exactly what we're talking about. Because right now it's 2 interviews, 2 minutes each, which isn't very clear for us. If we are asking questions, total amount only 2 minutes. I think we need to flesh that out if we're going to do it. I agree. Or define it as in there's a separate question we're going to have for that round. Clarify. I like having it written out like this though, and having a clear process we rely on.
okay, well, we still have several announcements to get through, so we need to decide that right now.
Well, I would endorse first phase, second vote the same night. If we're to a place where there's somebody or clear, we're done. Is there a way we're clear at that point, the second vote? If we each have how many votes?
3, unless there's 3 or less candidates.
Then what?
Then we only
one.
have one.
Theoretically, we could be done at that point.
Correct.
I think for the second round on another day, I think we still need to clarify that piece. It's going to be a question we're going to give to each applicant in beforehand, or it's on the spot. I do like having that piece in there for a contingency, just personally.
I would rather have a speech, just give us 2 minutes of what you think we need to know than us have a mystery question, because I don't want to think of a mystery question.
That's fine, but, and I would rather just do it all on the same night.
Yeah. So if we do mystery, or if we do 2-minute speech that night, does that satisfy everyone?
The same night as a 5-minute speech, though.
Right. Does that, but you're the one that wanted a speech, an extra speech. So does that feel okay to you?
I'd be okay with that.
Okay.
So we keep it pretty much the same as is.
But it's not a question answer, though, it's a straight speech?
Yeah, whatever they want.
For 2 minutes.
Okay.
It's up to you, Andrew, if that seems to,
I'm not sure I'm going to get any farther. It's hard to, trying to get something else other than what.
Okay.
so it seems to me like everything that is on here except blue dot number 3 would add unless 3 or fewer with an arrow going down to diamond. I mean, going up to
Vote with one
that.
vote.
Yeah,
Okay.
right?
So we're eliminating the option of a third, or of a second night right now. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's my straw poll.
Is that what I'm hearing? Yeah. Is that understood by everybody? Okay, so we're doing this in one night. We go with, so yeah, I'm just gonna try and restate the
Don't get a
straw
vote,
poll.
you're not on the council anymore, Mayor.
I'm gonna try and restate the straw poll. So first round of voting, everybody gets 4 votes. If a candidate, if we get 60% or more, they continue. If nobody gets 60%, 66% or more, then everybody that got a vote will continue. Then we'll do a second round of voting. At that point, if there is more than 3 candidates in that category, then everyone will get 3 votes. If there are 3 candidates or less, everyone will get 1 vote, at which point everyone will get, those remaining candidates will get a 2-minute speech, and then we will have our vote after that.
Correctamundo.
With one vote. Okay, all in favor? Thumbs up? Okay.
And, sorry.
So may I say that is your plan as of now, but you have every right to, on that night, if something goes in a different way, you adjust as you wish.
Like ask a mystery question?
Right. It's in the universe of possibilities, I suppose.
Thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, just another quick note. So what we did last year was hold the interviews in the chamber. Is that what you'd like to do again?
Yes, we'd like that again.
Okay, and then just for the applicants, FYI, once the council selects, the city recorder will be there that night to swear them in. And just like last time with Councilmember Valdemoros, taking your seat and continuing the rest of the meeting at that point. I think it's fairly late in your formal meeting when that item will be on your agenda, but they would take the seat and be a part of the council from that moment on.
Okay, so dress accordingly.
Just for pictures. Hawaiian t-shirts are encouraged.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Council or executive director announcements.
Okay, the council has the opportunity each year to put each council member can select a month in which they can have a newsletter in the public utility mailing. And we have the months of April, August, and December. We can have up to 3 council members in each of these slots, but it's only 1 council member per, I mean, everyone gets 1, but we have a little bit of flexibility. So we need to find out who will be in April, who will be in August, and who will be in December. And this year, we don't have an election to worry about, so I think everyone is free to choose whatever they would like. Okay.
I don't mean either.
Okay.
Do you remember? Does anyone remember what months we had last year?
3, up to 3. Mhm. I think we get the newsletter done by the end of March, and then it goes out throughout the month. It's a rolling distribution. Okay.
I would like August, please.
Okay, so we still have, anyone that hasn't signed up, you have, okay, you can do this, you can choose any of them, okay. Okay, all right, and then you have before you again the, not the 2018 calendar, but the 2020 calendar. So you have seen this before, and you've given us input. We're giving it to you one more time so that you can look closely at it, and maybe you want to do that when you're at home. But we need to know in the next day or so for absolutely any changes that you'd like to make. You still can make changes later in the year, but this is what will be published. And the better handle that we can have on it from the beginning of the year, the more transparent it is for the public. May we?
Mr. Chair, may I say something?
And Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. I was sort of joking the last time we brought this up, but can we look at rescheduling the RDA meeting that's on my birthday? Because I may not want to be here because it's also the day after Labor Day.
Okay.
What day is that?
September 8th. So maybe we can get with Danny and see if there's another day that would work for an RDA meeting with the council.
Do you want to move the council day too, or just RDA?
That's up to you, Mr. Chair.
Oh.
But I think what I would think is maybe just move RDA up to the 1st or to the 15th, because Revolution is the next week, and ULCT.
Okay.
Okay, so possibly the 1st or the 15th.
Yes,
but
please.
we should check with Danny, would you say?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, okay, and then if anybody sees anything else in the next day or so, then let staff know.
Okay.
Okay, and then we have given you an additional copy of the financial disclosure, and it's really important that if anything has changed since you last filed, that you get that to the city recorder's office, and you need to have your signature witnessed.
Where is it?
It's in your attachments here.
Okay.
Okay,
And so if nothing's changed, we don't have to fill it out?
that's my understanding.
Okay.
Okay. Then there is, because Council Member Luke is no longer with us, there is an opening for a city council member to represent Salt Lake City on the Salt Lake County Council of Governments. The mayor has a seat. Mayors of all other cities in the county have seats, and the cities of a first class also have a council member seat. So if there's more than one person, typically what we do is you express interest, and then either the group can figure it out or the chair can decide. It's been done both ways. So the next meeting is on Thursday in the at 11:30 or something. Where are they held? Rachel, do you know where? Okay, Wasatch Front Regional Council, maybe?
County building.
Oh, there we go, right there. I could have read that. Monthly. Okay, box lunch, 11:30 a.m. Meeting starts at noon until 1:30. Organizational items to prepare for the coming year. D. Wasatch, or excuse me, the County Council of Governments.
Less than
Approximately,
monthly.
It's a little less. We don't know. Roughly monthly.
We also do it, you can pencil me in, if it's that less than monthly.
Is that okay with everyone? Okay.
Yippers.
All right, and then there's, also we have the Utah League of Cities and Towns Legislative Policy Committee. At different times, we've had 2 people serve, other times we've had 3. The current individuals are Councilmember Fowler and Councilmember Johnston. And we did not ask them yet whether they are interested in continuing.
I would like to stay on, if that's all right with the other council members.
Nice to have somebody from the legislative subcommittee on it.
You're on, but she's on that, so,
Yeah.
okay. Do you want to stay
Okay.
on it?
Good question. Anybody else want to?
Yeah,
Sure, I'll stay on it.
it's up to you. I mean, we can do with one, and then depends on if
Could
you
have
get
2 of
too
us on
busy.
just in case.
True.
And it is the kind of meeting where any elected official would be welcome to join. It's just on the, when they do have votes, they limit it to the people who are official, but they've been nice to welcome anyone.
Generally during the session, it's a bigger deal throughout the year.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Announcements from the chair and vice chair. I don't have any announcements. Do you have any announcements, Mr. Vice Chair?
No,
Excellent.
thank you, I relish the opportunity.
I do not. I do not relish. Okay. Okay. I think that's it then. All right. Then we are adjourned.
Good work.
Yay.
Yay, Mr. Chair, you did great.
So proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Started out a little rough.